Welcome to Trial by Wine. We take a closer look at crimes that highlight how fascinating humans can be. Schmidty, Swanee and Clarkey visit crimes and run them through their jury of three, debating both sides of the case to agree an appropriate, if totally fictitious, sentence. Please be advised, Trial by Wine may include explicit or disturbing content and will include drunken rambling. Listener discretion is advised. All right. Good to see everyone. How are we?
Very well, thank you.
We're well.
Yes, likewise, very well. I think this is our first Friday recording, which is super exciting.
Yeah,
The world
It's
is
been a
better on
long
a
time.
Friday.
It was. Is it our first? It might be. Have we done a
It
date
might
one
be.
before, perhaps? But certainly, we haven't done a sort of clock off, Friday night style.
Yeah.
And it's so good because I've just clocked off for 7 weeks, even though I'm going to have surgery, and I am feeling like I'm on holiday. It's so good. I will not feel like this next Friday, but right now I'm enjoying the
7
feeling.
weeks. That's wonderful. Well done, Schmidty.
I know. All you have to do is have your hip replaced, and you too can have a lot of time off.
It's tempting.
It's not really. It's not really.
Do you get
I'm
to
going
do
to
it
go to the
all?
doctor
Do you only need one
next
replaced?
week.
Or will you have to do this again in the
now.
future? For now, okay.
I'll have to do it in the future with the other one. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I've spent the week looking up what mobility aids I need, what's the best kind of ice pack, and clearing the bungalow of any tripping hazard, and basically just getting myself slightly anxious but also prepared. So I think it's all going to be fine. But can't say I have a certain amount of trepidation, but for the next 5 days at least, I'm technically on annual leave, so I'm treating it like I'm on holiday, and I'm
Well, that's a
pretty
nice
happy
idea.
about it. I haven't had a holiday. I know I'm not going to Europe like some people around here. In fact, everyone on this call, but I'm not at
That's
work,
true.
so that's a plus. Yeah.
Wah.
I just want to know that you'll be able to drop it down low by maybe, say, February.
Well, it's funny because I don't know if you saw the reboot of Sex and the City, which is
And just
like that.
Yep. And
Yeah.
just like that, we
And-
both came up with that.
And I tell you,
Jinx.
I laughed because Carrie had to have a hip replacement.
Of course.
And I thought, yeah, they really are nailing our age group, aren't they? And she's a bit older than me. She's in her mid-50s, the character. But I was like, yep, no, they've landed this. And she goes to see a physiotherapist and he says, what are your goals? And she says, I want to get back in my high heels. I am waiting for a physiotherapist to say to me, what are your goals? And I'll be like, well, it's 50-50. One's get in my high heels again and the other's drop it like it's hard.
Drop it like
it's
it's
hard.
I used to be a pretty decent twerker in my day. That's
I
probably what
was
you
a
did it
top
on.
Twerker.
That's
I
probably what you
twerked
did it.
before twerking was a thing, remember?
That is a fact. That is
I'm
absolutely
the OG
true.
twerker. Thank you. The only person who witnessed it, I think, or there were a few, but yes, I was the OG twerker. All right, so enough about me and my bottom. How are you guys going?
No, we are great.
Yes, you're slightly less dusty than our last recording. A lot more energy coming from the Indigo Valley end.
Goodness
Yeah.
me.
Yes. That was a rough one
I
last
think we're
time.
all a little flat, so apologies to people who listened to that episode, but it's a great story, so I'm sure it'll come up fine. But yeah, I think we were all a little. That was our first return to the three of us, and
Jet-lagged,
you were jet lagged,
hungover.
they were hungover.
Middle of winter.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
Arthur.
so
You're
hi,
right, too.
Arthur's
Come
joined
to listen
us.
to the podcast.
Oh.
Yep, he's back. He's back, ready to podcast.
He looks like us. His excitement levels are like us from last
He
week.
does. He's had a bit.
He's
He's
not
had a
going
very
for it.
slow day. Friday is his he goes once a week to this thing which we call puppy kindy. It actually has a different name, but it's like daycare for small cute dogs. He goes and he just goes hard all day. So there's no napping, no
Best
resting,
time,
no
yeah.
nothing. So I imagine it's like going out clubbing. So he comes home and he's like comatose on a Thursday night, but even on a Friday, like he's in recovery mode. He doesn't eat. He doesn't even really drink. He just sleeps and
So
mopes around. So
tired.
he's coming off a big one.
Yeah, fair enough.
That's Friday. Friday, Arthur.
All right, so what are we drinking?
I'm really running very behind. So we're starting on a Friday afternoon and I'm only just cracking open my first DC for the day. And I'm going to quickly guzzle that down because I'm actually going to drink tonight as we record. So let me just have that. And then I'm thinking of, I feel like maybe some vodka sodas, a bit of lime. I don't know. I still don't want to do any wine or stuff
No, you
before
don't
the
have
op
to.
because I think I'm nasally enough. Let's not go crazy.
True.
So I think I'll just move on to the vodka. What about you guys? You got some nice wine?
This one is called, it's quite clever. It's Andrew Peace, who is from the Swan Hill region, and he has a wine called Masterpiece, spelt as his surname is, Peace. You know, it's a bit of a tricky play on words there. But it's a rosé, and it says, you should find this a seriously juicy rosé. It's packed full of big, gorgeous, fruity flavours, making it an incredibly refreshing and easy drinking wine. Just perfect for drinking on its own, and a great match with light, savoury dishes and desserts, and true crime.
Oh.
Cheers.
Really say true crime?
Cheers.
You trickster.
100% it doesn't. Oh, I know. I'm a pranky prankster on a Friday.
Oh.
How about you, Schmidty? What are
I've
you
got a
drinking?
very large mug here, which I brought back from the UK. It's about 20-something years old, and this one is
Oh,
Tigger. It's a Tigger
Tigger.
mug.
Tigger.
And it's not full because that would be wrong of me, but I am going really old school on a winter's night, and I'm drinking Bailey's.
Oh.
Irish cream, and
Wow.
it is delicious, even though it is a bazillion calories. But anyway, that's me.
Hey, Schmidty, I've got a question for you on the Baileys. In terms of Bailey's storage etiquette, do you store it in the fridge and use it up quickly?
I've never known a Bailey's to go off.
No.
Never.
Same. Somebody was saying to us the other
don't get it. Yeah.
week, yeah, you can't do that. It's horrible.
Never,
Like, what do you
ever.
mean?
And,
That's just the way you do
it'll
Baileys.
sit on my raised drinks cabinet in the middle of 40-degree heat summer, and I'll crack it back open in the
Curdling
No,
nicely.
it doesn't curdle. That's the point. There's too much alcohol
I
and
know, I'm
sugar in
joking.
it. It doesn't. Nothing happens to it. Anyway, I suppose we should tell everyone who we are. I'm Schmidty.
I'm Swanee.
And I'm Clarky. And together we are
Trial
by Wine.
Okay, so I better get on to our story for today. So this story was actually suggested to me by a listener of ours from California, and his name is Akash. Akash reached out to us a while ago after listening to the Brazil Nuts episode with some feedback for me, which I took on the chin.
Yes.
And we got chatting, and I asked him whether or not there was a story that he would like us to cover. And he suggested the case I'm about to do, and he did say to me, oh, look, it's really tragic and sad. And having spent several days doing my standard deep dive type research on it, it is really sad, and it's frustrating, and it's infuriating. So, in the immortal words of Two Unlimited, dun 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 dun. Y'all ready for this? Right. Okay, so my
Dun, 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 dun.
Before I go too far, I will talk about my sources. So my sources for this, I did look at a investigation discovery episode called Who Killed My Son? Crime Junkie podcast, thesun.com, and I spent a lot of time listening to I suppose she's a podcaster, she calls herself a YouTuber, Stephanie Harlow, who has an incredible channel on YouTube, which is all about true crime. And her series is a 3-part series, and it's called The Tragic Case of Pravin Varughese.
So she does like sensible true crime.
So if you were really interested in true crime, you'd be listening to her. And if
Not
you're not,
us.
that's what you should be.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, she's very serious about it. She made one or two jokes in the 3 hours I listened to, but she was her storytelling and her pulling together of the information was extraordinary. So highly recommend. Well, Pravin Varughese was a 19-year-old originally from Chicago and a sophomore at Southern Illinois University studying criminal justice and living in an apartment in a building with his cousin Ashley, who he was very, very close with. Pravin was an extroverted person, liked by everyone he met, and the only son of Lovely and Matthew Varughese and brother to Priya and Preeti. On Wednesday, February 12, 2014, Pravin attended an off-campus party with a load of college friends. The next day, his cousin Ashley woke up a bit dusty from the night before All been
Been
there.
there.
He'd been at the party, and then he went to work late shift at a local bar, and he didn't get home till about 3 o'clock in the morning. So the next day, he got up a bit late, about 11 o'clock. Next day, as he was leaving his apartment, he noticed that Pravin's room door was closed. He knocked on the door, and there was no response. So he tried to open it, but he found it locked, which wasn't that unusual because Pravin apparently locked his apartment door. I mean, it's not that weird. So around 2 to 3 p.m. that day, another friend of Pravin's, Kyle, called Ashley asking if he'd seen Pravin because he hadn't shown up to class. Now, that was unusual and totally out of character for Pravin because he was a very conscientious, very goal-driven student. So as much as he'd go out for a party, he wasn't like he was the life and soul of the party, but he wasn't a massive drinker. He wasn't crazy. He knew when to go home, and he was very, very dedicated to his studies. He'd been described as being a bit more homesick by this point in time, so he kind of just wanted to get the university stuff done so that he could move on and go back to Chicago and spend more time with his family. So, concerned about him not showing up to class, Ashley checked and saw that Pravin's car was still in the parking lot. But as he didn't answer his door or attend class, Ashley started calling and texting him as you would. He got no answer, and he became seriously worried, particularly when the phone started to go directly to voicemail. So at this point, it's likely that the phone was switched off or had run out of battery. So Ashley and Kyle decided to go to the house where the party was and search the house and the surrounding areas, and they didn't find any sign of Pravin. Whilst they couldn't recall whether or not they didn't think he'd drunk very much the night before. Certainly he had a couple of drinks, but they didn't think he was, particularly inebriated. They were still very worried, so they called around hospitals and police stations to see if he was ill or in a lockup. They didn't call his parents because the parents didn't know that he or Ashley would, drank, and they wanted to exhaust all options first before they got him into trouble. And I can understand that. The parents were pretty conservative. This was a very good boy, and they wanted to continue to keep the peace, basically, about his drinking. And like, I grew up with some Italian girls who used to say, "Oh, I can't do that. My dad will cut my legs off." So it was a sort of similar pressure when you're 19 that you don't want to upset your family. And so I get why they didn't do that. So back on campus, they got the apartment manager to unlock the apartment door, and Pravin wasn't there. There was no sign that he'd slept in the place. It's pretty hard to tell. I mean, apparently it was pretty messy because he was a standard 19-year-old college student, but there was no indication that he had slept there the night before or that he'd been around. So at this point, they called the police and they reported him as missing. The police then called his mother, Lovely, who was in Chicago, which is about 6 hours from the university. They asked if he was there, and she didn't quite understand why. She'd spoken to him the day before. There'd been no issue. Why would anyone expect him to be suddenly back in Chicago? The police officer then advised that he'd been reported missing. Again, she didn't quite understand that because she'd only spoken to him the night before. Then the policeman said, "Let us know if you hear anything from him," and hung up. Can you even imagine? Just let us know if you hear from him. Ciao. Okay.
Isn't that okay?
I don't think so.
What should he have said? It's my social awkwardness.
Here's a number to call. We'll call you back at this point in time. This is
good.
the process that's going to happen. Don't panic about it. It could be a fairly common thing. It's only this amount of time. Number of things that he could have said to reassure her at that point in time. There was nothing to worry too much about, or there might have been something to worry about. What is the next step for her to take? What should they do? Right?
Do you feel good at this stuff? Yeah.
Just common sense. So Lovely and her husband Matthew drove the 6-hour journey immediately to Carbondale, which is where the university is situated, with his mum calling constantly. And of course, by this time, all of those calls are going to voicemail. Pravin was a good boy and he would never ignore his parents. So, of course, that made her more and more anxious. Can you imagine a 6-hour drive where you're desperately trying to get onto your son and you're getting nowhere?
Were they going faster and faster every hour? Like, I
bet they were.
You'd be
they probably
flooring
did it in 3
by the
hours.
end of it.
Yeah. They arrived at Carbondale and they were told, they got to the police station. The police station said, I think they must have arrived at so she got the call at, say, 11 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night. Some of these details, there was so much detail, right? Sometime that evening, she was told he's gone missing. They jump in the car. So I reckon they arrived in Carbondale in the early hours of the morning. So probably somewhere between 3 and 5 o'clock.
Which also shows how seriously they were taking it.
Oh, 100%. They show up to the police station and the police person says, "Oh, look, the investigators won't be here till 7. So no one's here to talk to you." And so they said, "Well, what do we do?" And they said, "Go get a hotel room and come back at 7. So they did. So they went off. Then his sister Priya arrived, and they all waited anxiously, I'm absolutely convinced, to speak to the investigators at 7. They get there at 7 on the dot, and the police are there, and they're talking to the investigators. And immediately Lovely noticed that the police aren't really taking this seriously at all. They said, "Oh, don't worry, college kids do this, happens all the time, nothing to worry about," kind of thing. But his mother's like, "Pravin never ignores
not.
us like this. This is, yeah, it does not. This is out of character. This is not normal, right? Not our son." So the police sort of begrudgingly almost do some cursory investigation. They go and look at his room. They check his laptop and his phone. And they find that his last call was on the night of the 12th to his friend Anita. Now, later, we find out, well, she's a really close friend of his who he used to call all the time. She doesn't live anywhere near the university. I can't remember where she lives. She lives somewhere else, but she's a really good mate of his. And it was one of those things that, he'd go out late and he'd often ring her, and it was just, standard. So she reported that when she answered his call that night, he said, "Anita, don't hang up." And then she heard a car door close, arguing between Pravin and another guy, and it was an agitated argument. The guy said something like, "Give me that back." Pravin said, "I'm trying to help you." Then she heard a lot of running and jostling type noises. And then she was calling out to him, "Pravin, you there?" And with no response, she hung up.
After he said, "Don't hang up."
I think she was calling out, got nothing. Probably didn't know what to do, didn't know what was going on, and hung up. So that was the last call that he made.
What time was that, Schmidty? Do you know? Was it like late or?
I think it was something like 12:30. So the morning of the 13th.
So after he'd been to the party kind of thing. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Yep. So at that point in time, our defective detectives finally decided that something might actually be up. And so they start searching the local areas on the Friday. So remember, he went missing. So he'd gone missing Wednesday night. All of this, them coming down, and it took all of the Thursday to determine he was missing. Mm-hmm. They show up Friday. The police say, "Okay, we're going to start looking for him on the Friday." Pravin's family had a load of people come to help, and a huge group of people from Chicago and the university student community came together to search for him. Around 200 people converged on Carbondale to help to find Pravin. A reward fund through, and they filled every hotel in the place. The whole place was booked out because of all these people who'd come together to try and help him find him.
People that knew him, or just people who...
Yeah, family and friends. So
right, gotcha.
The word spread, and so a whole bunch of family and friends came to try and find him. Mm-hmm. A reward fund through family and friend donations was announced on the Monday, the 17th of February. And by that time, it started at $5,000, but by that time they'd been able to raise $15,000 US, obviously, for anyone who had information that would lead to a criminal prosecution or criminal case. Now, as things proceed, Lovely still has that feeling that the police are not doing everything that they could do. And at this point, the university hasn't even put out any alert to their student community to advise that someone's missing. And the police didn't put out an APB, All Points Bulletin. On top of this, on the Saturday, literally a day after the search started, the police said, "Look, we don't have enough resources and we're going to stop the search at the end of Saturday."
Why?
We tried.
We don't have enough people. Don't have enough staff. Can't find
We're busy.
Can't find. Yeah, we're busy.
Weekend.
And then they also asked the family when they're going to leave to go back to Chicago.
Oh, is that because they want to catch up with them tomorrow, or just because they're creating too much work for them?
Just because there's nothing to see here. We're gonna stop looking for him.
It's time to go.
Well, they have him in the cop shop and they didn't want them to find out. It's like, oh, yeah, it's us. Can you go away, please?
I know, it's extraordinary, isn't it? So his mother, Lovely, is very intuitive, although, to be honest, given what I just said, it wouldn't take a psychic to think something's off here.
I feel like they had a boy's look and went, "Oh, no, I can't see it."
Man eyes. Total man eyes. Yeah.
Where you left it.
Yeah, that's right.
It's literally right in front of you. The day he was reported missing, she'd been feeling uneasy and unwell, and she'd even taken the day off work. But she couldn't work out what was wrong until she got the call that evening to say, "Your son's been reported missing." So it's like she'd had a premonition, right?
Oh, don't do that.
Yeah. And then a few days later, she had a dream of her son being pushed from a moving car and rolling down a hill, I think it was. And that further convinced her that something terrible had happened. And some people I've listened to have said that in Indian culture, if you have a dream in the very early hours of the morning, it's most likely to have come true or reflect truth. So obviously, this freaked her out even more. And so she told the police about her dream, and of course they ignored it, didn't they? And perhaps because of this dismissive attitude, Lovely and Pravin's family were not going to give up, and they were not going to go home.
Yeah.
Like anyone with a missing child, they were determined to find him. But true to their word, the police called the search off on the Sunday
So they've got 200 people there to help.
to help, and they
And
go,
they
we don't have
don't
enough
have-
resources.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. On the Friday, I believe they had like a helicopter out, and they had dogs, and they had the official kind of search party.
For the boys' look.
And they all had a little
Like,
sniff.
we did
the dogs
our
had a sniff.
best.
The boys had a look, and then they went home. Shocking. Okay, but fortunately, one of Lovely's cousins actually called the Illinois lieutenant governor, who instructed the police that they must keep going, and so they did.
Be better.
So it was just you happen to know someone who knows someone.
Mm.
Lovely and Priya went to the media after that, which is, I think, on the Sunday or the Monday. Sunday, I think. Not 100% sure. Because let's face it, the uni hadn't made an announcement and the police were trying to shut down the search. And so they got to a point where, like, no one's taking this seriously. No one is reaching out to the public to say, can you help us? So they went to the local media and they made, they made a statement about it.
You'd like to think that that was part of the boys' look, that actually went, we can't find it, but we'll go and ask for help to get the word out.
So fortunately, they made sure that the reward information was out in the public domain. And that was definitely out there by Monday the 17th. I suspect they might have done this on the Sunday. The same day, on the Monday the 17th, the family were in a meeting with the dean of the university, because what had happened is after they went to the press, the police said, we're not happy with you doing that. You shouldn't be
Of
going
course.
off and doing your own thing.
You're making us look incompetent.
Mm-hmm.
Funny
And you
that.
should be working with the university and hand in glove with the university. So go and talk to them. So on the Monday they had this meeting with the dean. It was during that meeting that the dean advised them that the police had received a tip regarding Pravin's whereabouts.
Sorry, the university told the family that
Thank
the police had got a tip.
Correct. Thank you. Yes.
What?
Seamless.
Yeah, they're good.
Theory is that the police didn't really want to have to deal with them, obviously, and sort of push them over to the university to deal with. I don't know.
Why?
The whole thing.
Well, they didn't have the resources. They've already told you why.
Yeah, no, I think they were just like, look, there's nothing to see here. It's not a big deal. They were told to continue searching, which they did. After they went to the press, they then got this tip. They were able to, from that tip, then find Pravin. Rather dramatically, when the policeman arrived, and she knew at that point in time that he'd been found, and I think at this point she also knew that it was not going to be good news because they hadn't heard from him and it was all a bit sus. She said, where was he found? And the police, not answering, policeman turned around, walked down the hall to a window and pointed out the window to a wooded area about 400 metres away and said he was in there. But why can't you just say he was found in an area not far from here? What's
use
with
your
the
words.
turning around in this dramatic bizarro? The whole thing is so weird. So tragically, Pravin was found dead. He's around 400 metres from where the family was staying in their hotel too, in a wooded area off the highway. And the police, now this is where things just, I mean, it's already been shit, but
I was going to say it's been so good so far.
So I want you guys to imagine that you've got a rage meter, right? So you've got a scale of 1 to 10, and at certain points in this story, I'm going to check in on where your rage meter is sitting, because it's one of those. This is a story full of rage for us and everyone else. Okay, so the police theory about what happened, largely created around the information gathered from the tipster, alleged that Pravin was extremely drunk and most likely on drugs. He got a lift from a friend and an argument happened and he jumped out of the car and ran into the woods, got lost in the woods, and as it was February and freezing, and it was, and he was only wearing jeans and a t-shirt, he actually succumbed to hypothermia and froze to death.
End of story. Tidy. Put it away.
Accident.
That was interesting.
Wankers, because they didn't get
Great
any
story, thanks,
information that
Schmidty,
would suggest something different.
He was found on his back with his jeans pulled slightly down around his waist, about
That's
halfway
normal.
down.
That's normal
to
for
his boxes.
hypothermia, isn't it? Because you're cold, so you like to pull your jeans down a bit.
Actually, I'll come to that. I will actually come on to that because it is.
Don't
Anyway,
come at me.
his shoes were missing and there was a sock removed. There was a pair of shoes, but they weren't his. bizarre. His T-shirt had been removed and was under his body, and his other sock was about an inch from his foot. Much later, it was discovered that the shoes next to his body weren't even his, and his own shoes have never been discovered or found. And there is no info on this, of course. No further inquiry to determine who could have taken the shoes or where his shoes were and what that all meant. Anyway,
Nothing to
he was
see here. Move along.
Correct. It was
We
topless on his back.
we don't have resources to look into this.
And it's not even suspicious.
No, not at all.
Oh,
Far
wait.
out.
Oh, wait.
But wait, there's
Rage
more.
meter. Get that rage meter happening. Anyway,
we'll
he was
wind her up.
topless on his back. Jeans pulled down to there, wearing the sock.
Did you say
Now-
topless on his back?
Yeah, he'd taken his top off.
It was
his
totally off.
top-
Okay, yep.
Now, to your point, Clarkie, it's not uncommon in hypothermia cases. In the later stages, you have this, what they call paradoxical undressing, where a chemistry happens and you feel like you're boiling hot, and it's all to do with your nerves shutting down, all the rest of it, when in point of fact you are freezing to death. So it is quite common for people in the later stages of hypothermia to undress because they think they're hot when actually they're freezing. And that's
Right.
part of why the police had this theory that it was hypothermia. And it's not to say that he didn't have hypothermia, right?
He was so cold he took someone else's shoes off.
The shoes thing is so weird, yeah. But let's recall the timeline. Let's think about this. So it's Monday. He went missing on the Wednesday night. The police just got a tip, led them to his body, and at this point, they have already determined that it's the likely circumstances and the cause of death. They've already said, yep, as you said.
But also, there was Anita's testimony, which adds a lot of suspicion to
We
the
find
whole
that out
thing.
later, I think. I think
right.
at this point in time that's one of those timey-wimey machines where we know that later, right? So the difficulty of this story was how much to tell you that was found out
Where's the
later.
reveal? Yeah.
Yeah, versus giving you a timeline. But I felt that the timeline was really important because it plays to the point I'm making here, which is that the police said, with no autopsy, no toxicology report, they just rocked up, looked at this person and said, oh, hypothermia, job done. See you later. Let's get a cup of tea, boys. We're out. It was like, let's wrap this up. No problem.
High
Nothing
fives
to
all
see here.
round. God, we're
And they were
good.
trying to
We are
shut
the
the
A
search
team.
down.
Been here since Wednesday. Yeah.
So here we go. On Monday afternoon, around 5 hours, 5 hours after Pravin's body was found, the police chief, Jody O'Gwyn, fronts up to the press and announces the death was accidental and there was no foul play suspected. He says he got in a car of a recent acquaintance to get a ride. It was freezing cold and it was reportedly, unseasonably cold. Everything's in Fahrenheit, so I don't know what these numbers mean, but it was like 19 and then it went to 7, and I think that's like sub-zero in
Yeah,
Celsius.
It sounds
I-
cold.
It's freezing, right?
Yeah.
I remember, Carla, when we were in the UK in freezing temperatures and we'd go out to nightclubs and bars, we wouldn't wear coats either because we thought we just got out of a car and walked to a bar. So the fact that he wasn't super dressed to go to a party wasn't weird in that kind of temperature because, it's car bar stuff, right? We're straight in,
It's
straight
minus
out.
14 degrees Celsius, 7 Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
It's
Freezing.
Illinois,
32
they're used to
degrees is
it,
zero.
I think it went to 7 overnight. I think it was about 19. It was described as something like
32
19.
is
But it's
zero.
still cold, right? Really, really, really cold. It was sub-zero. It was freezing. We've established that with all of the intel in the room now. So
All over
he gets into the car with this recent acquaintance to get a ride because it was cold. But for no apparent reason, he wouldn't say where he wanted to go or he wouldn't describe. He'd be like, turn left here, turn left there, right, whatever. And so that was all very confusing. And then he got out of the car and then he ran under his own agency into the bushes. At this point in time, the chief of police, who's not spoken to the family, not spoken to anyone, just goes straight to the press and says, this is what's happened, is effectively saying, as far as we know, he got in a car, he got out of the car, he ran into the woods, and he got hypothermia and he died.
It doesn't sound right, does it? I don't think they teach you that in media relations at Police Academy.
Now, he was asked quite specifically by the journalist at the time whether or not there were any signs of a fight. And he said very clearly there were no obvious signs on the body to indicate a fight or altercation. As I said, he concluded that he ran into the woods under his own agency, having got out of the car. he was asked if he was properly dressed, and he said he had shoes, jeans, and a shirt on. Missed the point that he wasn't wearing a shirt
right.
when his body's found.
He did
he
say
didn't
no
say-
obvious signs too, didn't he?
There are no obvious signs on the body to indicate a fight or
Yeah.
altercation. I believe,
And we know that
I
they're not
wrote
very
that
thorough.
directly.
So, you know, from we kind of saw a body over there and we couldn't see anything. So we just figured case closed.
I don't think this guy saw anything. This chief,
Yeah.
O'Gwyn,
I guess that's my kind of point. They weren't so obvious that I would have had to actually look, Chief O'Gwyn.
I think probably what happened is a couple of other people looked, reported it back to Chief O'Gwyn, who then went to the press and made his announcement. But the important point is he doesn't have made any connection to the family. He's Lovely and Matthew have been in
How
town
bad's
since
that? Like,
Friday. Yep, that's
Yeah.
right. Straight to the press, though. Right, straight to the press. The family asked then when an autopsy would happen and when they could view the body to identify it. And they were told the autopsy wouldn't happen for a few days as there's no local examiner, and to organise a viewing
short on
with
resources.
yeah, there wasn't anyone local, but the nearest one was like 3 hours away, not 3 days away. But they were told he'll
right,
be
so-
there in a few days. And so on their request to see the body, they were told they could organise that themselves with the funeral home when they take him home back in Chicago.
What?
Yeah. So I don't know. Again, I don't doubt that Lovely has a great deal of intuition, but seriously, it doesn't take much to go, what the hell is happening here, right? This is
Does
awry.
anyone work in this police department? Get off the fucking donuts.
Agree. Now, I believe that it's standard procedure to have a person who is known to the victim to positively ID the body, because I could have a wallet or something on me. It doesn't mean it's my ID.
Because
that's
you've
all sorts of
seen
things.
movies, you've seen CS, because
I
you
have.
watch
Yeah,
TV.
you've been to the
I have.
University of
I have been to the
SVU.
University
Law and
of
Order, yeah.
CSI
Law and
Miami.
Order, yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or Miami. That's right.
Hmm.
So obviously that's all a bit weird, right? So and they said no, you can't see him. We've already got the ID. This is our process. This is our policy. That's the
Shove
way
your
it works.
process up your ass. Where's your decency, mate?
You can't see him?
Like, what?
Lovely believes that the dismissive attitude of the police was driven by racism, as she and her husband are both Indians who emigrated to America. And she talks about how the fact that she speaks with broken English and with an Indian accent. And so the whole way through this...
Oh, well, that makes sense then.
Well, also...
It only adds to the asshole-o-meter.
Oh, okay, get the rage-o-meter happening,
Yeah, no, it's
right?
coming. Don't worry.
Yeah. Okay, so when they finally get to see their son, and I won't even get to
At the
story
funeral
of that.
home, or did they get to
No,
see them
this
in
is
the...
so on Wednesday, the 19th of February, the autopsy did take place, and after the autopsy, they prepared the body for the family to view it. Now, originally they told...
So they made them wait till the funeral home?
No, this is the autopsy. So
Or till after the autopsy?
couple of days after. So on the Monday, I think they said, can we see our son? And they said, no, you'll have to wait.
Nut
So
punch.
on the Wednesday, firstly, they said only you and your husband can see Pravin. And then the sisters burst into tears because they were upset. So they were like, oh, all right, you can come too, I suppose. Only immediate family, right? So then on the Wednesday, I mentioned how there are lots of supporters and family and
Yeah, the
friends
200
come in.
people couldn't come and see the...
Well, no, of course not. But what had happened was they told them to go into a chapel at the hospital to wait while they prepared the body so that they could view him. And then the coroner, same coroner who had said, oh, no, only mum and dad. Oh, all right, only immediate family. Comes into the chapel and there's 20 or 30 people there and they're like, okay, you can all come now. So... And the family hadn't even seen him, and they're basically saying everyone... All right, ready now. I was like, no.
Anyone, one in, all in?
It was so weird.
Yeah,
Anyway,
wow.
so they finally get to see their son. And when they do, now I can't remember if I've mentioned at this point in time that Lovely's actually a nurse and her husband Matthew also works in the medical industry, right? So they're not stupid. They know how things work. And when they finally see their son, there is significant evidence of trauma to his face. Remember our chief of police saying there was no obvious sign? Of an altercation, no fight, nothing that we could see. There are 2 very large marks on his forehead which look like dents into his head. And there's bruising that travels right across the forehead, across the bridge of his nose, and I believe his nose was broken as well. And he has underneath the eyes the early stages of bruising that you get, which is in line with a broken nose.
Well, that must be.
But no, no sign
none
of-
of that sounds easy to see.
No, exactly. Yeah. So then, here we go.
And it's on his face, so it's not even like there's clothes over it that they would have missed it.
It's funny you should say that, because at the time that Lovely and the family view the body, they only see his face because he's covered by a white sheet, right? So that's all
here
they
we
see
go.
at this point in time. Yep.
Oh.
So then, to rub salt into the wounds, the police ask when they're handing the reward money over to the tipster, and how are they going to pay for it? I love your faces. Stuart just leapt out of his chair. I don't know if you saw that.
Oh my god.
Whew. So
Ouch.
this autopsy that took place on the Wednesday the 19th, which is a week after he disappeared and passed away, based on the findings of the autopsy carried out by the pathologist, Dr. Jacoby, advised the family that the cause of death was hypothermia. As you'd expect, Lovely said, but what about those bruises? But was told they probably happened when he was wandering around in the woods, possibly running into a tree. It was only in a meeting after the autopsy with the police that Lovely and the family found out that there'd been a fight preceding his death between Pravin and a recent acquaintance. So she didn't even know that there'd been a fight. You know, so the tipster story and all that stuff they hadn't told the family anything. They had neglected to involve the family in any of this.
So let me get this right. When we talk about the recent acquaintance, is the assumption for anybody at this point that the recent acquaintance was the driver of the car? Is that the person that he had the fight with? It's one the same, right? There's not another fight that happened at the bar that's separate. Okay, right.
Oh my God. You should be a policeman. You could work in
that kind of
Carbondale because you'd be better than these.
Amazing
kids,
analysis
right?
there. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. So basically, the police are working on this idea that he got in a car with this acquaintance and then he jumped out of the car for no apparent reason and he died of hypothermia.
Oh no, they'd had a fight though. They did think they had a fight, right? But that happens.
But that was only told to the family after the autopsy. And this is they're still saying there's no
foul play.
There's no foul play. Yeah. And yet he's covered in bruises and he's got these very clear marks on his head, but there's no foul play.
Just a coincidence there was that fight first, yes, and then he got out and ran away.
Yeah.
Played silly buggers in the woods and ran into the trees.
And
it's also quite possible that he's been beaten up, knocked unconscious, and
died of hypothermia.
except he undressed, so maybe he's come back
of course
at some point. But
again,
that doesn't mean
why
that
don't you
one's
apply
guilty.
to be a policeman in Carbondale? Because these people did not come to this conclusion. They did not even seem to entertain this idea.
I don't have the resources.
Well, neither did they, but they had at least two policemen. Anyway.
And clearly I'm not racist enough to ignore all of that shit.
At this point in time, the coroner will not confirm whether the wounds were consistent with the fight or whether he ran into a tree. It's like, I don't know, it could have been either, right? It's fine. So she says, okay, so there's
why
been
does
this
it
fight.
even matter?
Yeah, so exactly. So she says, okay, well, there's been this fight. So is this recent acquaintance at least in custody, right? And they go, no, he's not even a suspect. What are you talking about? He's great. He's been cooperating with us. He's all right. He's all right with us. Oh, and by the way, can I just check again? How are you going to pay the reward to the tipster?
Wow.
And
I'm tipping the tipster's the driver?
No, but nicely played. The tipster is the driver's cousin.
Oh, yes.
And at this point, they don't tell the family that tipster is actually related to the acquaintance.
Oh, my God. There's nothing suspicious about this at all.
No, nothing at all.
Oh, my God.
Stop being so melodramatic.
Simultaneously to this, our mate, the new acquaintance, is also in the police station being interviewed for the second time. So the first interview, I believe, took place on Monday the 17th after the tip was called in. So they've brought him in again because they're not actually really believing what he's saying, right? So they've got him in at the same time as they're having this conversation with with the family about and mentioning that there was a fight and this is what's happening. So, look, Lovely starts thinking about getting a second autopsy done because she's like, this is just not right. But you can imagine in the throes of the grief that she and the family were in, you'd question whether you'd have the energy to continue to listen to your gut or just move on or, what's the right thing to do. But then her feeling that something wasn't right was confirmed when the funeral director in Chicago, and they took the body back, asked her if she was a nurse. And she said, yeah, weird question, but yeah. And he says, okay, I think you need to come and see your son's body. So the funeral director basically said, this person doesn't present like someone who's died of hypothermia, and he has a series of additional injuries that the police and the pathologist never mentioned. So he had scratches all over his arms and torso, which are consistent with running around in the woods, to be honest. But he was also covered in a whole lot of bruises, particularly on his legs. He had bruises all over his legs, and he had quite a deep to the bone slash on one of his forearms. And so, of course, immediately she looks at that, and because she is a nurse, she knows that this bruising and these wounds were not post-mortem, and so she organises a second autopsy.
It's interesting because I could see those, like bruises and cuts and scratches being consistent with running through woodlands possibly, but you would have to still question why they were running in such a panic that they did all of that.
Yeah.
If you were looking into any of that, you'd be going, why would they be running that fast? If you were going to go down that path, you would be going, what on earth were they running from to be that scared, kind of thing?
Yeah. Also, the way I've been telling the story, it sounds like he's running for, I don't know, ages, and like running from the place where he gets out of the car to where they find his body. I think it's something like 30 meters. So it's not a huge distance. He didn't run, around and around and out for hours wandering. None of that happened.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm saying is, though, that even if you were going to go, there's no fight, you would still think something was worth looking into, and you'd still want to know what
That's
had happened.
way too obvious. Yeah.
Unsurprisingly, the independent pathologist found that Pravin's injuries were consistent with a beating.
What?
Wow, that's so out of left field.
I know, unexpected. I know. Dr. Margulis, the new pathologist, ruled that the cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. He also had a broken nose, deep slash to his forearm consistent with defence wounds. In addition, Margulis found Bethune's DNA, who's the acquaintance, on Varughese's remains, as well as DNA of an unidentified individual. And I have my theories as to who that is. Ultimately, Margulis concluded that Varughese died from blunt force trauma, likely, to your point, Clarkie, while running for his life. So at this point in time, we still don't have a toxicologist report. Look, I don't work in forensics, but it seems to take several weeks to get toxicology reports back, and that includes the original toxicology report taken by the first pathologist and the second pathologist.
So just on that, are they the blunt force trauma whilst running for his life? Does that mean that they think he ran into something? Because he's clear, they're saying he's had defensive wounds, so that it sounds like there was a beating, but do they think the final blow was from running into something, or do they think that he while running got cracked anyway?
Okay, so there's quite a lot of detail about this in terms of what the second autopsy says. It's a very good question, because we've got the first guy who says he ran into a tree, not necessarily that killed him, but he ran into a tree. And then we've got this guy saying blunt force trauma. He didn't rule out that he may have run into a tree. But what he did say is that, I talked about the dents on the forehead, which were like these big black marks. They were consistent with basically knuckle scrapes
Dusters
from a punch in the head, or just your knuckles, but just punching you in the head. The broken nose and the force to the forehead was also consistent with being hit in the face directly with a fist. But he didn't rule out that he could have been hit by something else. But a lot of the wounds were consistent with someone punching you in the head repeatedly.
Yeah. But it's because I think that's the job of the person doing the autopsy, to either rule things out or not rule things out. And it sounds like the first one was just all about ruling things out. Whereas the second one is going, there are possibilities here, none that I'm going to rule out, but I'm also not going to rule anything out. So look into all of it.
Yeah, and the first pathologist spelled the guy's name wrong. And referred throughout the report, there are at least 3 times where he refers to Pravin as a female. So
are you kidding?
The theory is that he copies and pastes a lot of his documentation, and there's a whole series of documentation around organs and all that sort of stuff, which looks identical to other autopsies that the man has undertaken. And I do think
there's it's hard to spell their names because they're funny names because they're from a different country.
Oh,
can't
don't,
quite
because I
do
think there is
that.
a lot of that in this. Yeah.
But that's what I'm actually
So
agreeing with that. I think it
disrespectful.
sounds
I know you're being sarcastic, but
horrendous, right?
it is. It's so incredibly
Somebody
disrespectful.
lost their life here.
So anyway, as I was saying, we don't have a toxicology report, but even without it, it's clear that the second autopsy calls into question the police's assertion that the death was purely accidental and not criminal homicide, or at least any sign of foul play. Right. So I think we've already got enough basis of evidence to question the original police's position on it. Yeah.
Oh,
So go
no
on.
obvious injuries. There's fucking obvious injuries.
Again, with the man eyes, like just look at his head.
Yep.
Like seriously, like there's man eyes and then there's man eyes. What a disease!
A blind person could use their braille and go, "There's obvious injuries here." Like,
and beaten and dragged. That's why his pants are coming down.
Oh, we don't know yet. So I've got
woods.
theories. I've got some theories on that. Okay, because we love our police force, they then send another letter asking for the reward money.
So who's sending these letters?
But what happens
The
at this point in
police.
Chicago?
Why the
Isn't she
police?
then going
Yeah,
to?
correct.
Aren't the police being contacted? If she could manage to get a second autopsy, surely she can put a call through to another police department saying we've got a problem. How does that work?
I don't know how it works. I think she's kind of forced at this point to deal with the Carbondale police because it's on their jurisdiction.
Okay,
I don't understand American stuff enough to really understand.
It seemed, and I wouldn't know that you would call, look at Yellow Pages to go, I need a second autopsy. Who can I get to do an autopsy? It doesn't seem like something I'd reach out and know how to do.
From memory, Dr. Margolis worked for like another university or something. I can't remember where he came from, but obviously I don't know how they got there, but he's done an excellent job. He's done the job that one would anticipate or expect from a forensic pathologist, and these are his findings.
But before we get into that, so we're at a point where we've got a body and the police have done a shit job investigating it and don't have any suspects, but their primary focus is getting the reward money for the cousin of the person who should be the number one suspect.
Yeah, because apparently he's ringing all the time and hassling them. I don't even think they gave two shits about the reward itself if the guy
They know the connection?
Yeah, because they're lazy.
They've got enough time to do that.
I think they
Yeah,
know
but he's just creating more work for them.
Correct. We just want to clean this off our slate.
Common
nice clearance
theme.
rate.
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
done. Yep.
Send Lovely to the university because we can't deal with her workload, and then tell her to freaking hurry up and pay the reward money because the suspect's cousin is calling them.
So what is good about this is that at this point in time, because you can imagine what it's like, right? Your son's died. All of this weird shit's happening. Nothing's going the way anyone would anticipate it to go. You've now had another autopsy. You're being hassled for this money. Originally when they were like, how are you going to pay and what are you going to do? They were like, oh, well, we'll do it like this. By this time, though, they start to kind of, I guess, wake up and say, hang on, I'm taking a step back here. So they say, we're not going to pay because the reward money was offered based on information that would help to
that
secure
led to a prosecution,
a criminal prosecution or a conviction.
Yeah.
And by the police saying there was no foul play and it was just
correct.
an accident, there is no requirement for the family to
off
pay
the table.
Yeah, that's right. So they say we're not interested.
Yeah.
All right. So then the family set up the Pravin Action Council, seeking because the police have closed the case now. Job done. Nothing to see here, right? So they want to reopen the case, and at the same time, a local journalist, Monica Zoukis, also
local to Carbondale or local to Chicago?
Carbondale.
Carbondale. Okay.
They've gone back to Chicago, but there are people in Carbondale who are like, "This is bullshit." Now, I don't talk. I haven't got any information on this other thing, but there was another case in Carbondale that created a great deal of scandal, and it was already calling into question earlier some of the police capability. And
so they didn't just become shit all of a sudden. There was a bit of
right. There's a history of shitness, right?
Yes.
And so this local journalist, Monica Zoukis, was very aware of that. And, she had advocated for that case. So she picks this case up and she starts to advocate for it too, because like everyone with eyes, she can see that this is not right. This is just not right. So she also, because she's got a local radio show, she actually interviews some of the friends and people that were around. And she starts to work with Lovely. She actually reached out to Lovely and said, there's something wrong here. You need to get a second autopsy. Like, this is not right. And so she didn't know Lovely from a bar of soap, but they connect over this, and she's very much in their court to say there's something wrong here. And you know, I don't know if she said at the time. I happen to know that, as you say, they've got a legacy of shit investigative skills.
Yeah.
But you know, she's basically all of it. And as the story continues, this incredible relationship forms between the two of them, and they really work hard and together to seek justice for Pravin.
Uh-huh.
And you know, it's kind of
To do
you know,
the
one
job
of
of the police.
the police. That's absolutely right. Yes. When the toxicologist report comes back, lo and behold, can you believe it? Pravin wasn't drunk, and he didn't have any drugs in his system.
Yeah, right.
The working
Yeah, Lovely
theory,
couldn't have seen that coming.
but the police kept basically saying, college kid, he's drunk, he's on drugs, you know, that's how this has happened. So, of course, we're not surprised. There were traces of alcohol in his urine, which, by the way, is not against the law, but they were not in his blood, which means he wasn't as drunk as they made out. They basically said he was massively inebriated, and that's how he got disoriented out in the woods.
Yeah.
And instead of admitting that they may have been wrong, they just said, no, still nothing to see here. No foul play. Everything's
When are you
fine.
paying your reward?
Yeah, pretty much. So it does suck to be the police, because someone, I don't know who, released a video to the media of a state trooper who pulled our friend, the acquaintance, up on the night of Pravin's disappearance. And that creates another raft of questions about what's happening here. Just hold that in your head for a sec. This state trooper.
I want to know right now.
Are the state troopers the one who, like, highway patrol? Is that what a
Yeah.
state trooper is?
Damn you for holding up. Why was he pulled over? I want to know.
Well, okay,
Oh,
I'll
but
tell
do
you
it now.
because you're demanding.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So
where's my
he's
reward
driving-
money?
He's driving along.
The acquaintance is definitely the mystery man.
Yeah, he's driving along, and he sees a black truck on the side of the road. And when I say truck, it's a ute, you know, like our, I think it's a Ram even.
Pickup
I can't
truck.
remember. I think it might be a
Oh,
Ram.
yeah, Ram.
Truck,
Yeah.
I've seen
And,
Yellowstone.
And he's the lights are flashing.
They're everywhere. In Perth, everyone's got
pulled
them.
over. Yeah. Tony's got something like it. Anyway, so he's on the side of the road. The lights are flashing. The car is running. You know, the hazards are on. And so the trooper pulls up to do, I think they call it a driver assist. And he's like, everything okay here? And it's caught on the camera from the trooper's vehicle, right?
Body
Yes.
camera. All right.
We see our mate, the acquaintance, come up from within the woods, cross across in front of the camera, and then he walks around to the driver's side of the trooper's vehicle and starts chatting to the trooper. They have a little bit of chat. Apparently the state trooper says to him something like, have you been drinking? And he's like, no, mate. What are you doing? He said, I just picked up this black guy. He tried to hijack me or something. He tried to rob me. We had a bit of a scuffle, and he's run off into the woods. And the state trooper doesn't believe a word of it. He goes, yeah, all right, whatever. He looks around. You see him on camera with his torch, looking at the edge of the woods, just looking very...
Having a boy's look.
Cursory glance.
Yeah, cursory glance, because he doesn't believe it, right?
Yeah.
The guy said, oh, some black guy came and tried to rob me, and it sounds like a bullshit story. And he's like, yeah, look, whatever. And then he lets him go, and he goes.
Doesn't put him on the breathalyzer.
Doesn't do a sobriety test, no.
When you say he doesn't believe him...
About being robbed by a black man.
Yeah, but like, I don't believe you so much that I'll get my torch out and shine it into the trees a little bit.
Doesn't
but
care
that's
enough, that's all. So what, he's
Yeah,
fine.
I certainly won't report it.
He didn't report it, you're right.
Yeah.
I just don't think it was a big deal. Now, I just got to correct...
Was the mystery
not correct you, I've
acquaintance
just got to say,
white or black?
It was white. Now...
Or somewhere in between?
It was white. What I do want to say, though, is
that makes him believable.
Having lived in a university town or near a university town in the UK, uni kids do get up to a lot of nonsense, right? And they
Having gone to uni, 100%.
And this is a uni town, right?
I once got pulled up by the cops stealing a wheelie bin from La Trobe University. And literally running across the road with the wheelie bin as the cops came, and they said, "What on earth are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, someone stole that wheelie bin, so I'm just taking it back." And they went, "Oh, okay, no worries," as if this
See,
shit happens
and
all
they
the
didn't
time.
write it up. That's right. They didn't write it up, and they
'Cause
didn't
you're
book you, and they
white.
didn't do a sobriety test. It's
Yeah.
because you're white and titled. That's right.
That's exactly what it was.
And probably that is the case here. But the point is that he didn't see anything that concerned him enough to write it up, and he didn't report it.
If you didn't believe it, though, you would kind of go, "Look, let me just take down your details in case." Wouldn't you?
I don't know how many times
They
this
did-
guy's
to be
coming
fair,
across
they
the
didn't take my
shenanigans of these
details
kids.
down.
Exactly.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
the point, right? Now, back to our tipster. Now, our tipster was Jonathan Stanley, who, as I said, happens to be the cousin of the person referred to as the acquaintance. The acquaintance is Gage Bethune, who also
Yeah, but what's his name?
That's his name's Gage Bethune.
What?
What?
His name.
What a fucking
I say
name.
Gage.
It sounds,
As in
sounds
it's
like a
ga-
fat
dash
gay
gay.
bloke, like gay buffoon.
This is a pretty spelling one for you, Carla.
Oh,
I think
here
it's
we go.
Gage. You tell me how to say it. I think it's Gage. It's spelled Gaege. I think it's Gage. I've heard
Gage.
it on.
Yeah.
I've heard
I
it.
think
I've
so,
heard it.
Gage.
I've heard
I've
it in
never
all the
heard it, but yeah.
things that I've
Pretty
been listening
spelling.
to.
It's like,
Pretty
is it
spelling.
Welsh spelling or something? I don't know.
But what's funny is, for most of my notes, I wrote it as in gauge, as in a rain gauge. And then I had to replace it because I was laughing the whole way, going, "Oh, I cannot come at
A gay buffoon.
Gaege, a gay buffoon." No, all right. So Gage Bethune is also the guy who we see in the Troopers video, right? So now Jonathan called
What?
Crime Stoppers.
Hang on a minute.
Jonathan Stanley is the tipster. He rings Crime Stoppers and reports it to the police.
Oh, I
He's
had that the
reporting
wrong way
his
around.
cousin, Gage, the gay buffoon, Gage
Yes.
Bethune. So hard to say.
He, also
Gee.
known as Big Gay Al.
Big Gay Al.
Gay buffoon.
Super, thanks for asking.
And Gage Bethune is the man, notice the acquaintance, who we see on the Troopers video.
Right.
Are we all clear now?
Right.
Yeah.
Gage
Right.
Bethune
Oh,
is
only just.
He's
our
on the-
suspect.
as cl-
He's the man
as
we
clear as I'm
suspect
gonna
of
get.
stuff. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, the tipster says, "I'm coming forward about this because I feel really bad about
bullshit, 'cause I want the
for
money."
this family. I feel really terrible for this family. They've lost their child, someone's lost a brother, someone's lost a son. Oh, and by the way, can I get the reward?"
Yeah.
It wasn't a direct quote,
Saw that coming at you.
not a direct quote, but pretty much that how it happens. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think they talked about, like, it's a 2-page statement, and on the second page, the first page is all like standard stuff, and then suddenly it's like, oh yeah, and about that reward, that's a lot of money, isn't it? Jonathan the tipster advised that Gage and he were watching the local news regarding the missing student, because it was on the news, because of course the family got on the media on the Sunday, right?
No wonder
Ga-
the trooper didn't believe the acquaintance when he said, "What's your name?" And he said, "Gage Bethune."
Gage buffoon.
I
Carry
don't believe
on
a
your
word
way.
coming out of your mouth.
That's what he
Nothing
would
to
have said
see,
in this
carry on.
Carbondale
country,
buffoons. What a fucking mouthful.
He's not even
The
from
Carbondale buffoons. Oh,
They're not from Carbondale.
you're John Bethune, son, Gage. I mean, Gage Bethune.
I work
On
in
your
the
way.
Bethune department of the Carbondale Police, also known as homicide.
No. What I was going to tell you is he doesn't actually live in Carbondale.
Oh.
He lives in El Dorado. So it's
course
Gage
he
does. Oh my
Bethune from
God.
El Dorado.
Eldorado.
God.
Sure it is, mate.
It's about an hour from Carbondale. Yeah, okay. They're watching telly together. They see the story. Gage gets agitated, goes to the toilet, throws up, comes back, tells Jonathan that he met a guy who asked for a ride. The guy tried to rob him. They had a fight. Then a policeman showed up and the guy ran off. So, the policeman being the state trooper.
Liar, pants on fire.
Now, as I said, Gage has been interviewed a couple of times. First on the Monday when Pravin was found, and again on the Wednesday when the family were also at the station. And his story doesn't match Jonathan's, and his story changes over the course of interviews. When questioned, Gage said he picked Pravin up because he was cold, needed a lift. Then he says Pravin was making him drive around. I think he made out that he was quite pissed, seemingly randomly. And then apparently Pravin was on the phone talking to some people trying to score cocaine. Gage said he felt very uncomfortable.
Oh, I knew you were going to
about-
say that. This feels very bad. This guy's bad news. I want him out of my
This
truck
guy's
now.
He's a gangbanger. He's bad. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. So he started to drive out of town because that's what you do when you're uncomfortable.
What?
You go out of
Yeah,
town.
you go towards the
right?
woods.
Just said no one ever.
And then
Quick,
Pravin
let me
gets
find a remote location because I'm really scared.
so that this man I'm scared of can kill me. Exactly. Right?
Yeah.
So
God.
this all makes no sense. But anyway, then Pravin allegedly gets aggressive and punches him in the face or bopped him in the face.
Yeah,
And
because
then
he's
he said
driving out of town when he should be going
The other way.
somewhere
Then
he
he
wants
says
to.
he pulled the car over and he turned the car off and he put the keys in his pocket so that Pravin couldn't steal his car.
He did
then
not
he
because
got
the state trooper
His
found
car
him
was
with the
still-
lights on and the
yeah.
car running.
again.
Yeah.
Can you
Pants are still
apply
on
for a
fire.
job as a policeman in frickin' Carbondale? Right? They need you. So anyway, they get out of the car and they have this fight, which Gage describes as a bit of a scuffle, and they end up rolling down this embankment. Trooper
Oh.
shows up. Pravin
30
runs
metres.
away. We didn't talk about distance. It was
It's just
from
a table
pictures
drain.
and that I could work that
I'm
out.
just thinking Pravin was found 30 metres into the woods, so
About that, I estimate that. So from what I've seen, I don't know for sure, but
from your
he
GPS
goes- he-
satellite.
he 100% would have rolled down an embankment. There's some fence or something that he apparently crawls under, and he's found not far from that. But at this point, right, we now know that Pravin called his friend Anita. Now, we don't know why he called Anita. It's possible she was the last number that was dialed, or he was disoriented.
Oh, bullshit. He rang and said don't hung up because he was fucking scared.
Oh, no, he was scared. We're just saying we don't know why
Yeah.
Anita and not the police or someone else, right? So
Because the
why...
police don't treat black people with any dignity. They're Carbondale.
It's not dissimilar to a couple of weeks ago. I don't know where we did it with that story where the girl called her boyfriend and said, "I just don't
There's a
hang up,
man in the
listen
house."
to me." It's what people do. There's a problem just because that's the number. It's quicker
Yeah.
to call somebody you know, I guess. That's why.
Mm.
And then he probably puts the phone on the seat so that
And
she
you,
can
and
hear
you
everything.
don't know if you're about to be killed. You just
No.
want someone to hear what's going on. Yeah.
And going on in case you are going to be about to be
Totally.
killed.
The police's theory about him getting hypothermia and wandering around and all the rest of it and getting lost in the woods, what we know is the phone's working, right? We know the phone works until the next day. He had his phone on
Yeah.
him. Why would he have got lost in the woods if he could have rung someone and said, "Hey, I'm lost in the woods," or "I'm dropping a pin, come find me"? It's 2014. It's not, 25 years ago. All right, so get your rage meters ready. During the interview with the police, Gage goes on a little bit of a chat about how because Pravin wasn't white, it frightened him, saying
What?
words along the
Oh.
lines of, "I don't know what that population's like. I don't know what those people are capable of because he's not one of my types," right?
So he's murdered someone, more or less, possibly, and he doesn't know what they're capable of. Yeah, right.
Because in these interviews, it's clear that he's pretty well coached, and he's saying the whole time, self-defense, self-defense. I was scared. I was the victim. This guy tried to rob me.
Yeah.
That's his story. So that's where the
It all
whole kind of,
sounds like
I'm
that.
terrified of this man.
He was a cocaine dealer.
Correct. Yes. He was the one after coke. He was the dealer. He was the bad guy. I was the victim. And he says words along the lines of, "I'm a good guy. I'm the kind of guy who will help an old lady carry her shopping across the road. That's the kind of guy I am."
Oh.
The police went through Pravin's phone records when they were looking for him, and they determined, part of their theory about what had happened that night, they worked out that he was at a party at 60-something College Road, and then he apparently goes to another party at 405 College Road. So they basically said
Like,
his phone, though, was in use the whole night. He was on all socials.
because
right?
he's a
He was
university student.
Yeah, he's on
Yeah.
Facebook, he's, Insta, whatever the hell was available at the time, and he's super active. He's texting people, he's calling people, he's doing all that sort of stuff, except for around 30 minutes from nearly midnight to 12:30.
Yeah, wow,
So-
funny that.
Yeah. So when the police challenged Gage's story about Pravin being on the phone, calling the whole time, trying to score cocaine from 12 to 12:30, he said, "Oh, he must have been pretending." Yeah, people do that, don't they?
Oh,
They pretend
always.
to talk on the phone to a drug dealer for half an hour. Yeah.
Yeah. Just to
Yeah.
scare someone.
There is also, which we find out much later in the story, but we found
in the evidence pile that the family finally gets to see, there is CCTV footage of a man who looks pretty much just like Gage crossing the road in the town around. It's the timestamp on the video is 12:30, but that the timestamp could be wrong.
Could be daylight savings or something.
Carrying another person.
What?
Yep, it was marked for further investigation, and yet it was never looked into further. Now, whilst the timelines don't add up, as I said, the timestamp could be wrong.
What do you mean?
It could have been 12 a.m., who knows. There is also a clip of someone wearing a red shirt, which Pravin was wearing, walking down the road on the other side, and the timestamp on that is 12:45. But we know he left the original party earlier than that, which would support that the timestamps were wrong on these videos.
What? What do you mean it was carrying another person?
Wasn't very
with
strong.
in a red shirt?
It's black and white footage because it's a CCTV camera.
Right.
So we can't quite work out what colour. It's dark, but Pravin was a slight man. He was 5'7". He wasn't super bulky. Gage is 6 foot something. He's a big guy. And I'm not saying it is Gage.
Like the mountain carrying someone in Game of Thrones, like a big bloke carrying someone smaller.
Yeah, it very much looks like a person carrying a person. It really...
Where was that
lying
in
across
town,
his
you said?
arms, not
lying across his arms like that. Yeah. So
where was that, Schmidty? Did you say that was in town or just
it was
in
in
a
town,
road?
about 300 metres away from this party. 6-minute walk from where Pravin had been last. And right on, so you've got a 4-block radius, right? So you've got the original party, the other party.
Yeah.
Over here is where the bar that he was supposed to get to is. And it's sort of after that second house, it's sort of here-ish that we see this footage. So we know that Pravin was there. We know that Gage was at this second party. So we know he was there. We know this guy was here. This guy's walking up the street to go to the bar over here. At some point, we believe that he passed Gage. Now, the police say he went into the other party and got blind drunk, but we're not sure that that's true. Another person saw Pravin on the street. Pravin was cold. As I said earlier, he only had a kind of T-shirt on. He asked someone for a lift. The man who he asked for a lift couldn't help him out, but did say to police and I think gave evidence that he came across as extremely sober, not massively intoxicated, perfectly nice young man. So somewhere along that 4-block radius, there is a moment in time where Pravin and Gage, we believe, cross paths.
Right. And is there someone, the person being carried, do they look unconscious? Can you tell
Well,
that?
they're certainly not moving or they're not waving their arms around going, woohoo, like they're...
Yeah.
You're carrying me. Oh my God, this is crazy.
So
wasn't
romantic.
fun. Wasn't fun and games.
But also, why
didn't
wasn't
expect
that
to
looked
get picked
into?
up tonight.
Why wasn't that looked into further? Like what?
Well, because it was marked for
wasn't
further
anything looked at?
investigation.
But they closed the case. We don't need further
they were
investigation
busy.
if we close the case. Yeah, we're busy with. There's not enough people.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to point out is the whole time the police have got this theory that we've seen him at this place. His phone pinged out the front of that other party. He must have got in there and drunk all the beer, and I'll get on to why that's significant in a minute.
It's not a theory. That's a story. There's no... Like, a theory should have some evidence to it.
It's a story, right? But tell me why, given that his phone was alive and working till the next day, they couldn't find him in the woods. Like, if you can pick up the GPS tracking of him outside of this house, if you can pick up the GPS from his... There would have been a tower saying where this phone was. They can.
Reason they couldn't see the wounds. Too many donuts.
Okay. At the interview on the 19th of February, Gage said he was trying to buy cocaine, but he didn't get any. He then says he and Pravin decided to go and get some cocaine together. Yeah.
Right.
And this is the moment they become new acquaintances.
I was going to say, I was wondering when that happened.
Yeah.
Right then.
And so, come on, we're going to go for a drive out of Carbondale. And Pravin didn't seem bothered by that, didn't say anything. So he didn't get angry about it. And Pravin only got cranky when they were on the highway. Gage then made out that he was drunk and avoiding a DUI. So he made up the whole story to the police, the state trooper, to avoid getting in trouble, right?
He's a predator.
I think he's an opportunist. So the story to his cousin that Pravin was scared of him, his story to his cousin was that Pravin was scared of Gage. I think he was. And he got out of the car and tried to run away, and Gage chased Pravin and beat him up. But he told the police that he was the frightened one. He was the victim, and Pravin attacked him. The first version, as I say, is probably much more likely. Anyway, it's at that interview the police person asked if he had hit Pravin in the head with a rock. Now, he said, no, I didn't. But I reckon that's to do with how these marks that aren't there, not noticeable.
Yeah.
This is on the Wednesday, right? So this is, the police saw it. The police knew that there were signs of an altercation, even having denied it to the press. So what we don't know exactly what happened to Pravin in his last hours. Apart from knowing he was with Gage, it's very difficult to determine the circumstances. But here is my version of events. Right, so this is all I'm alleging this, but this is what I reckon happened. I believe that Pravin was walking down College Road from the party he was at 600 and whatever, was headed to meet his friends at the bar that was about 4 blocks away. It was freezing cold, and he stopped to ask a guy for a lift who couldn't help him out. The guy said no, but everything was nice between them, and because he said he's waiting for his friends. So Pravin continues along the road. He runs into Gage and Jonathan, the tipster, at the second party house, around 2 blocks down. Gage, who's been looking for money for drugs and being a bit racist, sees him as and possibly pissed off for a whole lot of reasons I'm not going to get into, decides this is a great victim for him and beats him up and tries to rob him.
At the party?
I believe, outside that house. I think he knocked Pravin out and he carried his body to his car and he put him in the passenger seat. They drive around for a while because there's a half an hour unaccounted for, and it doesn't take half an hour to drive the 5 miles to where Pravin ended up being. Probably trying to work out what to do because they've got this unconscious person in the car.
So you think the tipster was in the car as well?
I totally alleged, don't come for me, but that's my theory. Yeah, I believe Jonathan was involved. They head out of town and they get about 5 miles from the party houses, and at this point Pravin wakes up. And he realizes he's in a car, and he calls Anita because she's probably the first number on his phone and says, don't hang up. Gage, at this point, punches him, likely in the arm because we see all these defensive wounds. He then pulls over and Pravin jumps out of the car. Gage and Jonathan chase him down the embankment, punching him along the way. Pravin struggles to get over this fence. He goes under the fence. However that works out, a little piece of his clothes were caught on the fence, so we know he passed through that.
Possibly get some scratches from that.
Yeah, and from forestry. But most of the scratches were on his lower body, suggesting that he was most likely had his hands held high in a defensive motion because these guys were coming at him, right? They catch him and they beat him again. And at this point, I think Pravin is knocked out. Gage and Jonathan try to rob him. They might have pulled his pants down at this point. Maybe it did come from hypothermia, I'm not sure. Looking for money. Possibly at this point, they remove the shoes in case there's money in them. I still can't explain the shoes properly. Pravin's wallet was found in the waistband of his boxers. So it's possible Gage took it out, took money out of it, put it in his boxers. We might have kept them there. It's unlikely. And then they left. Because the state trooper shows up, right? So at least we do know for sure that at least Gage went up the road and started talking to the state trooper. There's no sign of Jonathan at that point, so there's no evidence he actually was there. He gets in the car, let's go, he goes. Now at this point, Pravin, probably unconscious for some time, they believe he was alive for a while, like quite some time. So it's possible he was unconscious. And
who's they?
Or the second autopsy, the pathologist. Yeah. So it's possible that he did succumb to hypothermia, but mostly because he was unconscious for a great deal of time, which would also account for why he didn't make a phone call and call for help. So he may have woken up in the last, period of the hypothermia and done the undressing, the paradoxical undressing. We don't know. I don't believe he was dead immediately. So I would say it's most likely that he woke up at some point, responded to the hypothermia, but by then it was too late and he passed away. And with my theory about Jonathan, Gage could have come back, picked him up, or he could have walked back into town and got a ride home, because there was a girl at the party who said she drove 2 others home and she thought she might have driven Jonathan home, but she couldn't quite recall. So there's a question about whether Jonathan was driven home from that party by this girl or not. And that's why I think that, and the fact that in some of the things he said as the tipster,
did they do a toxicology report on her?
They didn't do anything on anyone. They didn't do it. They took swabs of the car, Gage's car. They took swabs of him. They didn't test any of them. So then I haven't quite finished. So then Gage went on and got some drugs, and this is true. He went off, got some drugs, went to a girl's house. He
He
stayed
did,
with,
right? Okay.
and he had no money. He kept going on about saying, I had no money. I spent my last $10 on gas. So where did he get money for it? The girl he went and stayed with said he was definitely high on something, and it probably wasn't alcohol, and he had bloody hands. So, she witnessed that something had gone down. Once the reward was announced, Gage and his mate Jonathan decided it would be a great idea to try and get their hands on the money. So they concocted a kind of light version of this story to help work with the police and try and get the money. And then Gage's father, so the night that this all happened, Gage rang his dad almost immediately, although he denies all this and he wouldn't give his phone to the police and he was never investigated anyway. But he rang his
Mr.
police.
Buffon? What's his name?
Mr. Bethune. Don Bethune. He rings his dad and his dad's like, right, okay. And his dad admitted to getting a lawyer in to talk to Gage prior to him going to the police station. So he had a bit of coaching on that. And I'm telling you, the whole positioning of self-defense is, evident in that. And in my opinion, the police go along with all this because Pravin is A, not a local to the town, and B, he's Indian.
Yeah.
So that's just my view. I'm not an investigator, but the timeline, the phones, the physical evidence, it's not rocket science. Monica Lucas, Stephanie Harlow, and Lovely all believe that something like my account probably happened. And I wrote all that before I even heard their versions of what had happened. So that's four
'cause you
people
know how to
who
do this
aren't
shit.
investigators just looking at the evidence, right? And they had so much access to so much more than I did. And I know what I'm saying is conjecture, but, it's Occam's razor. The most obvious stuff usually is the answer, Anyway, but hey, the police, the professionals, they didn't come to this conclusion.
Tell me about Jonathan. Why do you think he was in the car?
I can't quote it for word, but Jonathan said things when he made statements to Crime Stoppers and to the police that indicate he knew a hell of a lot more than someone who was just hearing a story from his cousin recounting it. So the point about him, the fence thing, he said something like, oh, the guy was limping or he wasn't in a good way and he had to go under the fence. He, at that point in time, shouldn't have even known where Pravin was, wouldn't have known there was a fence there. So he had details about his... There's no way Gage told him all of that, right? He knew because he was there. But they never even thought to question that. Or if they did, they couldn't be bothered. So he's not even a person of interest. He's a nothing in this story. But it was the stuff that he said that makes me and others believe he definitely was more involved. Yeah. I'm not sure if I've been clear because I've been trying to tell this story, but just to recap very quickly, the police are saying originally that Pravin went into the woods after an altercation and of his own agency and succumbed to exposure. Then they introduced the idea that he was extremely drunk and probably on drugs as well, which would have contributed to that. Yep. Then we get Gage, who is saying...
when you say introduced, do you mean make up?
Well, I think after they heard from the tipster and Gage, that is when it came into the thing, because Gage talks about trying to get cocaine and they made it up, but because there's no evidence in the toxicology, there's no drugs, whatever, there's no evidence, but because Gage said, oh, we're trying to score some drugs, man, he's like, okay, well, so that's, he didn't say it like that, by the way, but they decide that is how what must have happened, and that's why he died the way he did. Now Gage's story is that Pravin attacked him, and for various reasons they had a scuffle, they fell down an embankment. He got one solid knock on his head or punch in his face. It's down the hill. They fall down the hill, down the embankment. He gets one clear punch in, one connecting punch, jumps up. The trooper comes. The more likely story is that Pravin did, for whatever reason, either get in his car or was coerced to get in his car or knocked out and got in his car. And he was frightened of Gage and he did leave the vehicle running away from Gage, who then followed in pursuit and punched him up. So there's the versions of events, because I know that we've just spent a lot of time unpacking this, been a lot of discussion around stuff. So I just want to clarify. Now that's kind of the end of our exploration of what may have happened.
I have no idea as to why that may have happened. That's where I'm confused. Or waiting for the penny to drop. It's like, but why? What was the motive for any of this? I don't really there's no link for me at the moment. Perhaps it will become apparent. Is that what you've got, the big reveal maybe?
The link would
Was
be
it not like
Gage. The link would be Gage
Drug money.
trying to get money. So
Yeah.
what happened here was Gage had only $10, which he either spent on fuel or he had for fuel. That, like, his story shifts around, right?
Yeah.
But he often says, I had nothing. And then he went to this party, and this is a party of a person who actually, the house owner apparently sells cocaine. Gage goes in and says, well, I only had $10. I was hoping, I'd give someone $10 and get a bit of a bump, And then he says, oh, but, $10 or $25 won't buy you much because it's $80 to $100 for, a line. For someone who's terrified of Pravin, who's talking to someone about copping some cocaine because he's very uncomfortable with it, he seems very comfortable about this conversation with the police. Anyway, so he's saying, oh, I just want a little bit because I wasn't feeling the party. Nothing good happens after midnight,
And they interviewed the people, the drug dealer at that party, didn't they?
No, but they interviewed other people. They did interview some other people. And interesting in the trial, which eventually happens, but in the trial, they were not allowed to introduce some of the evidence that had been part of the grand jury indictment, which indicated that Gage and Jonathan had been going around jiggling on car doors, trying to break into cars to get money for drugs, right?
Okay. Yeah,
so basically what we've got is Pravin's a college kid.
Opportunist, yeah. They're not college kids, are they?
No.
You haven't said
they
that,
just
but
came
you
into
said he
town
was
for
from out
some
of town.
good fun times, yeah. So Pravin's a college kid, probably perceived as having more money. So it's money is the answer. Your whole thing about what connects
money.
It is money for drugs.
Money.
Yeah.
Gage is 6 foot something.
I believe Gage is a big boy.
And
yes.
Pravin is 5'7".
Yeah. And pretty slight.
Gage is scared of Pravin because you don't know what those people are capable of.
That's right.
Gage also says nothing good happens after midnight.
That's what his father tells him.
Gage is also seen carrying a body crossing the road.
Someone remarkably like Gage, not necessarily Gage, seen
not
carrying
necessarily Gage.
something that looks remarkably like a body. Smage is seen carrying something that looks like a spotty. That's right.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No. Oh, now it's all starting to make sense. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Why wouldn't you believe Gage?
Yeah. Exactly. Just over a year after Pravin's death, the state did attempt to bring charges against Gage. However, it never submitted the second autopsy findings as evidence. The state's attorney is the prosecution, right? So now in
right,
the way...
and of course they're worried that they will look incompetent if they introduce the second.
Well, it's not the police, it's the state's attorney. They work with the police, right? Yeah. So the police will work up a case. Oh, and we all know this because of Mariska Hargitay, right? But basically the police will work up a case. They will talk to the district attorney or the state's attorney and say, this is what we've got. Is it enough to charge someone? Is it enough to take them through a criminal prosecution to get conviction?
So who doesn't bring up the second autopsy? The police?
The state's attorney. What happened was that Lovely, because the second autopsy was done at Lovely's request and it wasn't part of the original police investigation.
Yeah.
Basically, they were invited to provide the second autopsy information to the state's attorney, and they're I believe that the pathologist was invited to attend the grand jury to do the indictment. And Lovely said, I will give you the results of that autopsy provided you release the information from the original investigation back to us, because there were so many things that they still didn't know. And the state's attorney said, nah, you're like the pathologist. Dr. Margulis can come along, but we're not going to give you that. Now, Dr. Margulis basically said, well, I can't do that because I can't go and give evidence for a grand jury indictment without all the evidence.
Without the information
I want to
that I
see
need.
the other autopsy information and balance it with what I've seen, because it just didn't feel to him
because that's the way the world works.
The conflict of interest, or was something that was just not right from his perspective, right? And then the state's attorney, whose name is Michael Carr, he said he had another 3 pathologists coming along and he didn't need a 4th anyway. But, if you want to come, sure, come if you want. But, we don't really need you.
Because we've got such a watertight case with our amazing first report.
Extraordinary. And then, anyway, so that's pretty much why they left it out because there was sort of this argy-bargy. And I actually
I
think,
still don't know why.
well, I think a lot of it had to do with them being offended that a citizen, i.e. Lovely, had private investigation
More
happening,
brains than they did.
having a private
Yes.
autopsy, having all these other things happening and doing the job of them and showing them up. And I think they said, we don't want any part of that. We're going to go and try and have a crack at this indictment. But also, I just don't understand it, right? Because if you are the state's attorney and your job is effectively the prosecution and your job is to ensure that when you put something forward to a grand jury for indictment, i.e. the approval to do charges and go to trial, that you want to get a conviction. You want to win. You want to get that to trial, don't you? Otherwise, you'd say we're not even going there. We're not even going to do it. You know, Mariska Hargitay would be told, no, you don't have enough evidence. You have to go away, right?
Yep.
Why would you
Yeah.
even
Look,
go and do that, knowing that you are missing a really significant piece of information? And he did know about the second autopsy. He just was like, nah, don't need your love.
No, but surely Lovely shot herself in the foot here.
No,
Surely
why?
Lovely shot herself in the foot.
How?
Because she went to the
Because
Yellow
she
Pages
liked
to get her, to get her. She didn't go through the system to get the
But-
second.
but I don't
or she
get it.
could have just said, "Yeah, we'll give you the report."
Oh, here's the
Right?
information.
All
anyway.
this
Oh,
thing
yes, I
about,
agree.
I want to know. I want to know
Yeah.
what your report said.
No, but I would have thought out of respect for her, the person she got to do the report, he's saying he doesn't want to be giving evidence because he doesn't know the full story.
Yeah, but the first offer,
Isn't
the,
it-
the first offer was to just submit his report, right?
Yeah.
Without him.
Right.
Yeah.
And he was okay with that?
Well,
No.
sorry, that
She wasn't
evident.
okay
Yeah,
with it. No, she wasn't
She
okay
wasn't.
with it. She
No, I'm
wanted,
saying she shot herself.
she
in
wanted
the
more
foot.
information.
Yeah, but I think she's got integrity and probably assumes that.
Is it more about questioning somebody in your own field?
I don't know when it was, right? But at some point in all of this, someone says to her, like, why won't you? And it could have been at this point. Someone says, why won't you cooperate? Why won't you do this? And she goes, because I
Don't
just don't
trust
trust you. That's right.
Yeah. Well,
And why would you? After all of
Yeah.
this behaviour.
All of that.
And I
That's true.
suspect it's at this
I see
point in
that, yeah.
time. It's definitely Michael Carr who says, look, I know what I'm doing. Why don't you just trust me? Sometime along this process. And she's like, well, I just don't. Yeah.
Because you don't?
Because you're a
Yeah.
dickhead. Anyway.
Why don't you just do a good job?
So I hear what you're saying, Tone, but at this point in time, I don't understand. And this plays out why the state's attorney and the police would not work with the family in a transparent fashion.
Yeah.
You know, I just don't.
Yeah.
If you all just want to find out what really happened and you want the truth of the matter, why don't you just work together? They worked against her. Okay.
It
So,
sounds like every time she came up with something that could have been credible evidence, they wanted to find a way to
discredit it.
Discredited.
yeah, or at least get it out of the investigation, like because we're all the brains of this idiot show.
Yeah, and it's to
Clearly not.
Swanee's point about Lovely going to the Yellow Pages. There was some comment made around the pathologist that she used not being part of some accredited board or something. There was, I don't know, and I think in the long run there wasn't really anything wrong with his, his background or his understanding. But they tried that.
but
They were
you
like,
could
"Well, you're not part of our club, so you can't give us,
Yeah.
you can't be this."
But you could understand why he'd be then saying he wants to see the rest of the evidence because he's not part of the club.
Mm.
He doesn't want to go out there accusing the club without the full story,
True.
but he should.
Yeah. So anyway, as a possible result of the fact that that second autopsy was not included, 2 separate grand juries cleared Bethune of 4 different counts of first and second degree murder, involuntary manslaughter, and concealment of homicidal death. No charges.
And concealment of homicidal death.
Yep. So yeah. So basically, I think the
I don't
indictment.
know what the grounds are for finding guilty on that, but the name suggested he was guilty of it.
The indictments were first and second degree murder, charges of involuntary manslaughter, so you accidentally killed him, but then you hid the fact that you killed him, right? So you drove
And what
away
I'm
and you left
saying
him
is
in
that
the
I-
woods and you didn't tell anyone. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, exactly right. And then you made up shit to try to
To hide it further. Yeah.
conceal
Yeah.
it.
So my mate, State's Attorney Michael Carr, issued a statement saying that Pravin had been at a party, and then he talks about it being the second party, not the original one, where he consumed up to 2 4 locos. Carla, do you know what a 4 loco is?
What is that?
No.
So a 4 loco, I looked it up, looks like a normal, alcohol
Bruiser?
type thing in a can.
Oh, it's a drink, is it?
It's a drink, but it is
Okay.
equivalent to the
He's had
alcohol.
2 Alco Pops.
No. A 4 Loco has the equivalent alcohol to 4 to 5 beers each.
Jeepers.
And in some states, they were trying to ban them because they're actually quite dangerous. There's a whole other story about Michael Carr going on about how the young kids at the colleges, they put heroin in it too, you know. So that's probably what
Oh.
was happening here, you know. This guy's loon.
And this
Is
is
it-
the defence.
This is
sorry,
the
this
state's
prosecutor
attorney who should be on Lovely's side, right? Who should be
who
trying
has a
to...
toxicology report that says none of this happened.
Exactly.
And he's saying this could have happened.
Yeah, no, he said this happened. He
Wow.
consumed up to 2 4 Locos, so that's 10 beers there, 2 other beers, 2 rums, and apparently he'd played beer pong at a beer pong table and had consumed a further undetermined amount of alcohol. So anyway,
Which perfectly explains why there was no alcohol in his
in
blood.
his bloodstream, that's right, a little bit in his urine, but by the time he's out, a couple of hours, like an hour later or 2 hours later, there's no way that this man would have consumed that amount of alcohol and it wouldn't have come up in the toxicology report. Okay.
But how do you ignore the toxicology report?
I don't know, Carla. How do you? How do you?
I don't really understand.
Where is the
this.
rage
Was it
meter?
not submitted
I don't-
into
I
evidence?
just don't get it.
It's killing me.
It's because you're an ignorant.
Who gets it? No one gets it. There's nothing to get here apart from
Doesn't
people.
somebody else stand up and say, I object, here's the toxicology report? I don't understand how this works.
No.
You'd love to bring him undone just bringing out the toxicology report.
It's not rocket science. I don't
Have a
understand
look at
what I'm
this,
missing.
mate.
But if
Prove
if
that
he's
he's had
the
all this.
prosecutor, the defence aren't going to bring that out. So who
Exactly,
Lovely
as if
can't
they-
stand up in the middle of the court and say, "I object."
Oh, hang
So,
on.
like,
She wasn't even
what?
there.
Oh, she does.
No,
Oh.
they didn't tell her that they had convened
What?
a grand jury to do the indictment. She
No.
wasn't even there. Her and her family didn't know about it until afterwards.
Disgraceful.
So then, basically, Michael Carr goes on and on about Pravin being drunk, as if it justified him being killed. We know that Gage, by his own admission, was drinking, but let's ignore that. That's okay. He's a white man. Pravin is a drunk and a drug user, and even though there's no evidence to support this, I don't understand, as we've just said, why the state's attorney seemed to spend an inordinate amount of time trying to paint Pravin as a drug dealer, drug user, drunk and violent person. I don't get it. And he did.
No proof.
And he
at
seems to have
all.
forgotten that Pravin was the victim in this case. Unsurprisingly, our mate, Mr. Carr, announced that there would be no charges laid and that both grand juries had determined not to indict the suspect. So before this happened...
Well, of course they would if he does a shit job of
Yeah,
it.
and Carla, sorry, Swanee, but here we go, because you're saying why. I don't get it. I don't understand. Before the grand juries even happened, so they happened in the November. In the September, Lovely met with Carr. She was quoted in the dailyegyptian.com saying, in September, I came back to Carbondale and met with him face to face. He told me, get your rage meters up. He told me, I'm not going to charge that boy. I will not ruin another life. He'd already made up his mind. And from Stephanie Harlow's YouTube series, he expanded that
What?
quote to say, if Gage was somehow arrested, I would have to have him unarrested.
What?
Hmm.
He also told Lovely in a conversation earlier that year, so back in the February, that she probably shouldn't pursue it because bad things were going to come out about Pravin. He was playing on the importance of reputation with an Indian family and basically saying, oh, it'll come out that he's a drug dealer. It'll
Yeah.
come out that all these things. So you don't want that in the public. That's bad.
This,
Play it down. Go away.
Yep.
Shush. It's disgusting. When they met in
I
September...
will make it come out without any evidence at all.
Yeah, exactly.
He's a
I'm
pig.
the one who's going to tell everyone that the guys
Absolute
that all these things were there's no evidence. And then when they met in September, Michael Carr spent 2 hours of that 2-hour conversation talking down to Lovely, cutting her off, telling her that Pravin was a drug dealer, how he, Michael Carr, knows everything because he's an entitled white man in power. Okay, I'm praising this, but basically that's what happened. And nothing, not even evidence, would sway his position that Pravin was a drunk and died accidentally as a result.
Was a drunk who had absolutely no alcohol in his
Well, I know.
blood system.
I know. That's why this is an infuriating story. Anyway,
Oh.
okay, get ready for this. Y'all ready for this? Dun, 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 dun. He told, and I shit you not, he told Lovely to get over it, and that Pravin had had.
He did not.
You fucking
Stop
arsehole.
interrupting me, you entitled white men. He told Lovely to get over it, and that Pravin had had a comfortable death. Now
What an
respond
absolute
with rage.
prick.
Did you just call us entitled white men?
It was a joke because you were talking over me.
Now I am
I
outraged.
love the fact that it took 5 minutes for that to dawn on you.
No, I was determined I was going to wait for you to finish before I actually had a go.
No, I was
You're
Bloody
taking
hell.
the opportunity of the previous statements about an entitled white man talking over someone
I
to
love
have
you.
comic value in it.
I love you.
Swanee, thoughts?
I'm a bit speechless, to be honest.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can't cope when I hear stuff like that because I just can't allow myself to believe it's true that people have spoken to people like that. It just seems so outlandish. They think they could get away with saying it. I can't believe that was uttered. Do you know what I mean? That just seems to be beyond my
It does seem incomprehensible, doesn't
understanding.
it? Yeah.
yeah.
And I can't imagine how she managed to control herself. You know, I can't even think about
And how
I
do you
would
know
have
that
reacted like that.
This was all said. Where does she say that this was all
She
said?
took
How do you have
notes
that?
the entire time. She took
Okay.
word
Okay.
for word notes
Yep,
in this
yep.
meeting. So she noted everything that he said.
Can I just read you something? So the Daily Egyptian in 2016 asked Michael Carr, "What are your goals if you're re-elected?" Carr said he wants to continue the tactics and principles he's used over the years to focus on serious offenders and remove them from the community. We have to have a prosecutor's office that takes serious crimes seriously and removes those people from our communities so that people feel safe, Carr said. Carr said he wants a supporting and safe environment that results in someone not losing their opportunity to a criminal prosecution.
And yet, if you do listen to Stephanie Harlow's series, and I didn't, again, there's so much detail in it, but she talks about his prosecution rate, and I'm going to make these stats up, but it was something like of 100 sexual crimes from the university and from that area, he managed to prosecute like 5 of them, and he failed to indict or refused to indict 95% or something of them. This is not the first time this man has failed to indict a case like this or failed to take it to an indictment. And he's an elected official. You know, you realise that's an elected role based on that platform. Based on that
But
platform.
also,
Yeah.
so after all of his shit form, he then comes out and sprouts that filth. Like, you have no integrity, mate. You are just a mouthpiece.
Rubbish person.
Shut your mouth.
So while he thought he was untouchable and had supreme power, because clearly that's what he thought, the supporters of the Varughese wrote to everyone they could think of who were also powerful. And a week after the grand jury failed to indict Gage, O'Gwyn, remember Jodie O'Gwyn?
Yeah.
He was fired.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, but also, why was he fired and Michael Carr's all right? You know,
Well, because someone's got to be a scapegoat.
Correct. So then Lovely and Monica went to a city council meeting and presented, this is disgusting but beautiful at the same time. They went to the city council meeting and they had these blown up images of the second autopsy images, which they showed to the councillors. And unsurprisingly, some of those people were extremely horrified.
Yeah.
Sorry?
With the quote of there were no obvious signs of injury.
That was the point they were making. They were saying, how can you say that this is what the findings have been? Because they were trying to get it reopened. They were trying to get more people to pay more attention to this. And so they had imagery of this kid with all of his bruises, his cuts, his knocks on his head, all of that stuff going, this doesn't add up. This doesn't make sense. And obviously it was a very emotional day for the people at the city council. That was the last thing they probably expected to be on the agenda. As far as I'm concerned, take that, Michael Carr. Now, interestingly, and unbeknownst to Monica and Lovely, Michael Carr had actually already recused himself from the case in March 2015, so about a month after the 2 grand juries failed to indict Gage. And he called for a special prosecutor to review the case, confident that there was nothing wrong with his handling. So David Robinson, who's a special prosecutor from the Office of the State's Attorney Appellate, which is effectively the Court of Appeal, was appointed to review the case. Now, this man is our hero. We love this man. We will hear nothing bad against David Robinson, ever. So at this point, Lovely, about a month after the city council meeting, she gets all of the investigation files from the police, unredacted, the lot. And why? Because David Robinson approved it. Because he's not fighting with her, he's not working against her, he's being transparent as a investigator and prosecutor. So at this point, now she knows what the police knew at the time. She sees the statements, the videos, the transcripts, and lo and behold, this is when they find that CCTV footage of the bloke crossing the road carrying the body.
No.
Wow.
Over a year
Brilliant.
after Pravin's death is when they became aware
See
that
Smage
even
carrying the
existed.
schmoddy.
It was never mentioned by anyone prior to that, right? Even we've had 2 grand jury indictments thrown
Michael
out. No
Carr.
one
Who'd
Ah.
found
mentioned
it then?
Oh.
Do you know who'd
The
found it?
police had found it. It had been reported. It had been reported by another police officer. It's CCTV footage from somewhere else, and someone else had said,
Yeah.
"Oh, this is interesting," and it was in Pravin's case file, which
File.
means they thought it was related to him. It was the same
Yeah.
night that he went missing. It was the same time.
So it was never entered into
Nothing.
evidence?
It was entered into evidence. It was never investigated further to confirm or deny that it was
no.
related to it. Yeah, because they shut the case like
Because he was
a week
too
after
busy
he
making
died.
shit up about Pravin being a drug
They
addict.
literally shut the case a week after he died, and then they just
Terrible,
made up
terrible
shit
people.
after that. So our mate David Robinson spends about a year working it all through, and in 2017 he brings a case forward against Gage to a new grand jury who decided to indict him for 2 counts of first-degree felony murder, aggravated battery, and robbery. Now David Robinson believed that Gage stole money off Pravin, not the other way around, and he caused the fight. Now, I don't think that Gage set out to murder Pravin. I'll be clear on that. I think it was an opportunistic crime and it went wrong. So I'm surprised that they didn't go for second-degree murder and manslaughter. But, and that was, interestingly, the first round of indictments included manslaughter and stuff, but not the second time. He was going straight for first degree.
There's an asshole tax that you have to apply after all these years to go, well, we would have got you with that originally. Now we're going the jugular. Sure.
No, maybe. So he also wanted to admit into evidence tweets that Gage had made around 8 months prior to the death that were racially charged, indicating he was predisposed to dislike a person of colour. However, they were not allowed as it would be seen as prejudicing the jury. So in the course of the trial in 2018, the special prosecutor was able to prove that Gage lied at various points in his story, which wasn't fucking hard.
Wow.
Where the defence said that Pravin was looking for drugs, the prosecutor proved that there were witnesses that Gage was the one asking for drugs. As an aside, there was information that the grand jury had in the course of granting the indictment that wasn't allowed in the trial, which is what I mentioned before about the jiggling of the car handles and trying to break into cars, him and Jonathan. That wasn't allowed to be entered into evidence in the trial. Don't know why. The theory of the defence was that Gage and Pravin were driving around to buy cocaine because suddenly they're cocaine buddies. They stopped at a series of houses. They got no luck. When Gage drove out of town, Pravin asked to be let out. He then took Gage's money, who apparently never had any, so I don't know how that happened, but anyway, Gage demanded the money back. When Pravin didn't give it back, he punched Pravin. The troopers showed up and Pravin ran away, but he already sustained the head injury, preventing him from getting out of the woods and surviving. That's the defence's view, right? The defense team also spent most of the trial trying to blame everyone else for Pravin's death. The state trooper, Anita, his friend, who was at the end of a phone
made
call.
it up too, yeah.
And of course, Pravin himself. He implied Pravin was a terrorist and spent most of his time trying to paint Pravin as a violent drug user and dealer and a drunk. Go ahead, Clarky.
Oh, my.
So the defence, that's like the third story that the defence has put forward about
Making shit
what's happened.
up.
I know that dodgy shit can happen in the courtroom, but you should not be allowed to just make shit up. And the racially charged term of terrorism or terrorist in the context of all of that.
So he had a book in his room, in his dorm room on Al Qaeda. So he must be a terrorist, because he's Indian, He's one of them.
Because there's no,
He doesn't
no
use
connection
those words,
there, literally.
He doesn't use those words, but that is 100% what is implied. But he was doing criminal justice at the university.
Yeah,
and he was doing Guess what? A unit on counter-terrorism, which is why he had the goddamn book, because it was part of his bloody studies. I mean, how disgusting and
Also-
low can these people go?
I think you know that.
Also, can you? I don't know if you can, but I'll ask the question anyway. Can you explain the connection between India and Al Qaeda?
No, he's not even in freaking Pakistan.
Good.
That's
Well,
right.
Yeah, right answer. Like what? There is no connection.
He's just not one of us, so he must be a bad
Yeah,
person.
he must be one of them. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
God.
So anyway, Gage constantly said he's either had no money or $10, right? He's either spent all his money on gas or he's got $10 for gas. I'm not sure which. The money was
Either way,
important
it's
because
$10.
yeah, but it's either exists or it doesn't. But the point is that's all he had. And it's important because they did find some money. The state trooper actually recorded seeing these dollar notes on the floor, indicating that he'd likely had stolen it from Pravin. So the prosecution's theory was that Gage picked up Pravin, tried to rob him for drug money, beat him, and ultimately contributed to the death of Pravin.
Yes. So it's
Exactly.
quite feasible that he did die of hypothermia. Is that
It's
still on the
possible he did.
table?
Yes.
Yeah, but because of injuries
It wouldn't
sustained
have happened
prior.
if he hadn't been beaten up and had a
Correct.
head injury
Yeah.
from this
Correct.
idiot trying to rob him. Yeah.
Could have
Yeah,
walked
yeah.
home.
Just So the thing that got you in the end isn't necessarily the reason you died.
Exactly. So here's the good news. The jury found him guilty of one count of murder, felony, aggravated battery. I
In
know
the
you like
first
a good
degree?
aggravated. Yeah.
I do.
A charge that can levy up to 20 years in jail. And the sentencing hearing was then set for 3 months hence. And here we go, rage meter. Get ready for the rage meter. Are you set your rage
my
meter?
God.
Yeah.
So Gage then fires his legal team and hired a new one, who immediately asked for more time pre-sentencing because they were a new legal team, right? And Carla, his legal team
yes.
representative, his new defence lawyer,
Michael Carr.
was Mr. Greenberg. Do you know who Mr. Greenberg is? You are so good at this normally. He is the celebrity lawyer who represented R. Kelly. So he's
Oh,
a
I don't know that.
shitbag, right? Already.
It's a shitbag already.
Yep. So Greenbag says,
Greenbag.
oh my God.
Greenberg.
Do you mean shitbag or
Shitbag.
Greenberg?
Shitbag
Shitbag
Greenberg.
Greenberg. Yeah, Shitbag Greenberg. That's his new name.
I knew where you were
Says-
going, darling.
Shitbag.
Sorry, it's too many Baileys and rage. He says, I'm convinced the reason why the jury convicted in this case was that Gage did not purport self-defense, which he should have.
What?
He regrets what happened, but look what this has done to his life. Where is the sympathy for someone who was wrongly accused because you have an overzealous mother?
What?
Oh,
He is a shitbag.
I mean, that's victim blaming. That's
That's the worst.
That
victim
is
blaming.
all
I
kinds
mean,
of
Lovely
wrong.
and the family are victims of this. And he's like, oh, the only reason you're picking on this guy is because some overzealous mother's having a crack. Carla would have stabbed him in the eye. The look on her face right now is,
Yeah.
Mama Bear not happy. I mean, isn't it just the most disgusting thing? All right, so the new defence team, get ready for the rage meter. It's going to get higher again. New defence team said,
why
grand
was he
jury-
saying that, sweetheart? He was. Oh, what defence? What was Greenberg?
Greenberg
new
was the
one.
new defence attorney. So
Yes.
after he gets found guilty, he sacks his old person who was the ex-state's
Oh.
attorney,
And
and
then
he
Right,
gets
okay.
this new guy in. The new defence team comes in and argues that the grand jury indictment was fundamentally flawed.
Is this
Now-
Greenberg?
Right.
Yeah, this is Greenberg.
Thank you. I
But
understand that now.
it all seems a bit pointless, right? Because
he's
they're
been
going to
found
a sentencing
guilty.
hearing.
Yeah,
Correct.
yeah.
We're going to sentencing hearing. All right.
It's
So
done
then
and
at what
dusted.
should have been the sentencing hearing, Judge Mark Clark decides to announce that whilst the prosecution has done a perfectly fine job, there is nothing wrong with the prosecution's case. There's nothing that he can call to account on that. And they've provided adequate evidence to prove the crime and the guilt of Gage. And certainly to get the jury to a guilty verdict. Nonetheless, he decides to completely overrule that jury, which is, by the way, almost unheard
He does
of.
not.
and order a new trial for Bethune. And
No.
wait, Carla, because we know
Who's
we like
Mark Clark?
Fuck's sake.
No relation.
Mark Clark's the judge. The judge.
Yes, but I mean, why? What's going on with Mark Clark?
Because reportedly because he agreed with the defence and had decided that the instructions the jury received in the initial hearing were not clear and the jury may have been confused. The judge stated that the indictment could have been drafted with better words. I mean,
No.
a number of things I said that could
yeah.
be drafted with better words, but we don't throw a bloody guilty out.
You could have been given a first name that doesn't rhyme with your surname, but here we are.
Mark Clark. Right. The language in question is the word knowingly in the following passage. So, Gage Bethune committed the offence of first-degree murder in that he, in committing or attempting to commit a forcible felony with an independent felonious purpose, namely aggravated battery in violation of bloody blah, battery which caused great bodily harm or permanent disability or disfigurement other than by use of firearm without lawful justification, knowingly made a physical contact of an insulting or provoking nature, inflicting by defendant's own statement multiple punches to the head and face, rendering the victim dead weight. Does that confuse you?
Well, it does because it's a whole lot of words. But that's the language that they speak, and I think it's quite clear.
The guy knew he punched the guy in the head.
Yeah,
that was the indictment, right? And it caused his death. That's what it comes down
End
to.
of story. Yep.
He complains about a comma being missing.
Yeah,
and
a
that
comma.
And that's what he throws it out on. And he says
pause.
he's pretty sure that by the way, no one asks the jury if they were confused by the indictment.
Yeah,
They just could have been confused.
So
by
who's
corruption,
in his
isn't
pocket?
it?
And then threw it out.
Yeah, that is
I
corruption.
don't know the answers. But
Who's
that's
Don
where I got to.
Bethune? Let's have a look at that.
And who does Mark Clark report to? Is it the Lord himself, or is there somebody else?
I don't know.
Because I want to ring his boss.
Could be wrong, but I think I read or heard that about a month after this he retired. What a surprise.
Oh, right.
So, yeah, I don't know how any of this shit happens.
I bet he got
right?
a big lump sum from or somebody else.
Monica and Lovely think it's all driven by unconscious bias, that the judge was basically racist.
I reckon it's
personally,
conscious
I think
bias.
it's corruption. I think it's corruption.
I think it's more than bias. Yeah.
I think there's way more.
To overturn stuff and go back, and I think that's more
on
likely.
A comma.
They all think that they think because it's so unfathomable, right? That they sort of go, well, maybe it must be a race thing, because why else would people? It must be about protecting the white guy in the story. But I don't know about you. There's got to be something else in it. I just can't.
So it's all in the state of Illinois, yeah? It's all.
Yeah, and it's one of the most corrupt states in America, by the way, according to Stephanie Harlow. So anyway, Robinson
That's
did
a big
try
call.
Well, she's very good. She can make the call.
No, I'm just saying.
What are you saying? There's lots of
probably
corrupt
some competition.
states.
I don't know what I think about currently, but
True.
yeah.
So Robinson tried to file some. Well, he did file some other motions. They were denied. No surprise. Fast forward to January 2019. And Special Prosecutor David Robinson put a motion in to dismiss the current charges against Bethune and return his bond to his lawyer, and they were granted by Jeffrey Goffinay. Now, that might sound weird, but what that basically means is by dropping the current charges, we can ignore the old troublesome indictment and come back with a new indictment and come back with a new trial. So Gage isn't off the hook. He might be home and free at the moment, but he's not off the hook because David Robinson is still working to bring a new charges against him, get a new indictment.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it also takes away the double jeopardy as well.
And there's no statute of limitations for murder in Illinois, so they can take the time.
Come on. Come on.
Now, so there's a lot of detail in the case. I didn't get into it all, even though I tried to make it as light as I could, but all of your questioning made me bring more in. So I did cover a lot. But
it's very complex.
It was a very complex story. I found it hard to get a timeline clear and all the different accounts and all that sort of stuff. So if you're interested, there's stuff about him Gage dealing drugs from jail after his waiting his sentencing hearing.
What?
There's his father being a bit of a weirdo and his involvement. There's juror intimidation. There's so much scandal around this story that I can't fit it all in. So if you are interested, listen to the Crime Junkie podcast. That I listened to their update version from June 2022. Highly recommend it. That's only about an hour. But Stephanie, I've talked about it before, Stephanie Harlow's YouTube triple series of the tragic case of Pravin Varughese is stunning in terms of its detail and delivery. So I highly recommend her. Investigation discovery documentaries as well, worth watching. So at the time of this recording, there is no set date for the new trial. But Stephanie Harlow has set up a change petition to get this to the Supreme Court. Her goal is 75,000 signatures, and right now over 70,000, including myself, have signed this. You can find the petition by Googling Change United States Supreme Court Justice for Pravin. There's also a Facebook page called Justice for Pravin, which his family used to keep his memory and the fight for justice alive. In 2014, remember our mate, Jody, Chief of Police of Carbondale? He was fired, although the city said had nothing to do with the case. You may rejoice at this, but just to show that there are a few career mishaps that can't be overcome, including a stolen gun of his being used in a deadly shooting in 2011, he went on to be the Chief of Police for the village of Freeman Spur, Illinois, till 2017, and is now the Director of Law Enforcement Operations for Baker Group International. Michael Carr was replaced as State's Attorney in 2020, and Stephanie Harlow does provide more detail on other cases that he failed to prosecute. The family, the Varughese family, remember Pravin every year on the anniversary of his death, and they have established a scholarship in his name because they are simply the most beautiful people ever. So before we get on to sentencing, because I'm pretty sure you're going to have quite a lot to say, there are a lot of characters that should go down for this. I do want to call out that against this backdrop of conscious or subconscious bias and racism, corruption and self-interest, many, many people around the Varughese family have been extremely supportive. I mentioned Monica earlier, and I think her working to help fight for them shows that for every small-minded racist asshole out there, there are several decent human beings willing to step up to help their fellow man. Lovely has said that she wants Gage to face justice, but not to the extent that he's in jail for life. More that he has to take responsibility for his actions. She has also been clear that her son was not a drug user or a drunk and wants the world to see him as he was, a remarkable and kind person who was the victim of assault. She said that if Pravin were alive to address Gage, he would say, "It's okay, buddy. Just say sorry and go on." And I can't tell you how often in researching this that I cried for the loss of this really beautiful soul. The impact on the family of Pravin's loss is immeasurable, and I can't imagine how they've managed their grief, as well as this dreadful miscarriage of justice. However, whilst Lovely and her family are amazingly beautiful people, and everyone working with them want the system to, want the system to bring justice to Pravin, we are less good people. And our format allows us to at least imagine a way to bring our trial by wine justice to the people who have totally failed Pravin. So, judge, jury, and perhaps executioners, what say you?
Oh.
I need a moment.
Yes, same.
I need
Worse
a
than
moment.
that.
That is
Worse
just
than that.
fucking too much. That is that big. And I'm like,
Why?
how am I going to do it justice?
Thanks, Arkash. Thanks very much.
Yeah,
Woo.
yeah.
Isn't it just, and I left out so much because of time, but it's so important.
I'm
It's
shocked.
just
I'm speechless.
incredible.
I just don't know.
I don't know how to
It's
sentence them, but I do
so-
know who I want to. This was
Oh,
full
God.
on, and it was full on to research. I didn't anticipate getting upset, but I'm glad I did because I felt like that the whole way through. I was like watching imagery of this beautiful boy with his family and his family just trying to get justice, and just the mother. There's this saddest letter that she writes to Gage while he's in jail, and she's effectively saying, do the right thing with your life. You've taken my son's life, but make something of yourself and take responsibility and move forward.
Yeah.
But she describes the grief and the impact. That's why I got upset at the end, because
That's a remarkable woman, isn't it, to be able to do that?
she talks about how her husband just stopped talking. The shock of the grief of the loss of their son. She said, I just got used to the silence. He was not himself anymore. She described how the older daughter, who was at college, they really struggled to get through her studies and just was crying every night and asking, why is Pravin not like that? They were just devastated. And she didn't just hold that family together in that instance. She fought these idiots who wouldn't do their job at the same time. Can you imagine the strain? It's just like that's the bit that I go, look, it's one thing to go, like, we've all experienced loss and we've all experienced grief, and it is overwhelming and it's dreadful, but compound that with people just not doing their jobs, people not caring, people. So when are you going back to Chicago? And when are you paying the reward?
But then
What
also,
the
What's his name? The head of the Jody who?
Jody O'Gwyn.
it's like there
I
is
don't even have him on
absolutely
my
that
list.
people not
Yeah.
doing their jobs, but there's also,
There's more to
you
it.
know, once you
There's
get past
something
that,
nefarious.
you get to
Yeah.
that systematic corruption kind of thing, and I just think to fight that with such grace is incredible. And the standard you walk past is the standard you set. It's a really basic term in safety.
That's true, though.
They are allowing him to do this. And so, as people who are in charge of the legal system, to actually say, you know what, not only are we okay with this, we're going to work hard to protect him, you know, by making the victim look like the victim is the problem with no fact at all. Like,
No, that's
it,
the staggering thing. There's no
Who-
fact.
what?
Oh, no.
What is in it
It
for
starts
Michael
with the
Carr
police.
to?
Exactly. It starts with the police. It goes to the state's attorney, and then, I mean, you can understand the defense lawyer making up shit, but the burden of proof is on the state's attorney. It's not on the
Correct. Yeah,
defense
yeah.
to prove innocence, and he wasn't prepared to.
But I also like looking at the police now. I kind of go, if you're a police man, woman in Carbondale, and you've got senior people within the legal system who are behaving the way they are, would you bother? You know, and so we have, again, in safety, particularly in transport safety, there is a thing about the chain of responsibility. And so,
Yeah.
you know, if you're a driver and you do the wrong thing and you kill somebody, you can be responsible. But also all the way up the chain, depending on your level of involvement, you can be responsible. And I feel like the likes of Michael Carr have created a culture whereby policing is actually irrelevant. It doesn't matter whether you've got fact, because they will override all of that for their own. I don't know where the personal gain comes from, whether
Neither
it's
do
just
I.
from this
But there must be
satisfaction of
something.
being shit, or whether there's some strange little clan that sits
Hi,
in the
honey, I'm
background
home. I was
funding
extra
them.
shit today. I feel great.
Oh, I know, right? Or
I'm ecstatic.
let's all go out for drinks and talk about how shit we were this week. Like,
I didn't make a difference at all. Yay!
yeah, like, well, no, yeah, I actually made a whole lot of people feel even worse about their shocking situation. And like,
I know,
you're
it's
being
dreadful.
paid to do this, and you're doing the opposite.
So, okay, so while we're talking, I might kick off the sentencing, right? Because obviously I knew the story and I knew all the characters. And so I've got a list of people who I think have to take some accountability, and not necessarily for the death of Pravin, but for certainly the torture of his family for all this period of time by not doing what you're supposed to do and behaving in such a reprehensible manner. So, you know the film Deliverance?
Yes.
Right.
I've never watched it, but I know it.
We'd
you
never
see-
watched it until COVID lockdown, because I'd heard
really?
all
I've
about it. I
never
knew
watched it.
all I knew is
Obviously, I
ding
hear it
ning
referred to all the
ning
time.
ning ning ning
Yeah,
ning
Menacing.
ning.
yeah.
It's menacing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So
So
I've
we
got
watched it.
Gage, I've got Jonathan. I'm throwing him in because I'm pretty convinced he's much more involved than he's ever been suggested, but I'm pretty sure he's there. The judge, Mark Clark, the police, Jody, but it wasn't just him. There were several crappy policemen involved in this. I didn't name them. The state's attorney, Michael Carr, should have been top of the list. Dr.
Yep.
Jacoby, pathologist, who just makes shit up about and
Oh, yeah,
copies
yeah.
and pastes
Copy and
someone else's.
paste.
Yeah.
Can't get his
He,
name
she,
right.
whatever.
Both
Can't get
sets
his
of
gender
defense
right.
lawyers. Yep. I'm not picking on the state trooper. I don't think he did anything like as nefarious or bad as others. So that's my list of people, right? Now, when I say deliverance, I'm not talking about bending people over a log and saying, squeal like a pig, squeal like a pig.
Oh,
I'm
well,
more
what are you talking
about
Playing the
Well, I-
banjo?
Obviously, I haven't
yeah,
seen
well,
that
the
part.
banjo's definitely playing because it's menacing, right? And I think
Are
what
they
we'll
on
do
the
is
canoe going down the river?
no, I think they're stripped naked in a wood that is as thorny and uncomfortable as the one that poor Pravin ran through. And I think because I don't want them to get hypothermia, because I want them to have an extended amount of discomfort, I'm going to say it's like 5-6 degrees, which is cold enough to be uncomfortable, but well, I don't know. I'm not a doctor, but a doctor can tell
Won't
me
kill you.
won't kill
Yes,
you,
it would.
but will make you feel very cold and uncomfortable. And I
Give
think,
you an innie instead of an outie?
yeah, and
Yeah.
I think maybe what we might do is we might hunt them, and they,
Well,
just
that
hunt
happens
them.
in Deliverance with a bow and arrow.
No, I just think when we catch up with them, we might give them a smack or two. Not a beating. I'm thinking more like with a stick, a bit of a switch, bit of a whip, and then
Like a
make
bit
them
of
run forward.
Weeping
Yeah.
Willow. Remember when
Yeah.
your kids were Weeping Willow?
Yeah. A little bit of whoosh, and then off they run again. And then maybe if they want to squeal like a pig just for our entertainment, they can. But I just think that these people need to recognize the fear that Pravin would have been experiencing and bring them down off this incredible pedestal they've put themselves on, because they seem to think they are beyond reproach for being really incompetent. And so might not be everyone's cup of tea, but a little bit of scary hunting, bit of a whip every now and then, make them nude and uncomfortable out there. I'm all right with that. That's my sentence.
Nice.
All right, I'm going to go slightly different
Carla.
tack.
Of course you are.
I find this very upsetting, and I've been a little bit quiet sort of through a bit of it, and a little bit of it is to do with being a mum.
It's awful.
Oh,
Yeah.
here we go. I just find it really confronting that stuff like this can happen, and then the system just, it wasn't
Fails
even that it
people.
failed them, it was beyond failed them, because it was, there were conscious decisions made the whole way along to absolutely ignore what was available and to take a different route. So it's not like we got to a certain juncture and something happened and it went, oh, that's where it fell apart. It wasn't like, never fell apart. It was never set up to succeed. The whole way along, it was, there was a very clear decision made to not pursue that, the best interest of the victim. I think it's been very confronting for a whole host of reasons. And I think that part of it is the clear racism that was involved. I think that you'd be foolish to think that that wasn't central to everything that happened from the very outset. And I don't know that the crime initially, I know that they had found stuff that was, racially
It just made it
inappropriate
easier for him
months
to attack
before
him.
that.
It's not so much that he
Probably.
went, oh, there's an
I
Indian.
dare say he's probably just a nice kid. Exactly. Yeah, it's just that's an irrelevance. But everything that happened thereafter, that's when I really do think you can put a very clear spotlight on that and say, wow, that has been done through a lens of racism. I'm sure of it. And then I think you've got that coupled with the fact that the people that we run into, I'll call them characters, but that's a terrible.
I call them that too, because they are caricatures of humans.
It was just
they're not
like,
human.
Yes. They just seem to be like, it's out of a movie plot to me, that's like this is about as far-fetched and far away from justice and this sense of right prevailing, that the proven in a court of law that these are the set of circumstances, these are the facts, this is what's been proven. That was all irrelevant. The whole story was just like, well, based on a comma in the end. Just stuff that was,
I know.
I just am speechless. And the only thing that I can find in terms of common ground for anything that happened post Pravin's murder was that these people all seem to have this sense of being untouchable. And I don't know if how they've connected, whether it's, that old boys club, whatever it is. I'm not suggesting that they all knew each other. That's not what I mean. But the system must be able to support
Stephanie
that.
Harlow definitely
for that to be the case,
about
because
the boys club. Yeah.
If you put any of those situations in isolation, you look at them, you could say, oh, well, that's just ridiculous. That would never happen, or that person would lose their job, or they're incompetent, or they're whatever else. But when you start adding up 1, to, you've got Mark Clark, I've got the other one's names, all of them all together. It's like, this is not a one-off thing. This whole system is stacked
Yeah.
in the favour of people who are pandering to
White and entitled.
what? I don't know.
White and entitled people.
And that's what really scares me. That scares me hugely. Even as a white person, I can't imagine looking
doesn't
at that
mean that
through
you wouldn't be a victim
Lovely's
of
eyes and
another
saying,
white
"My God."
entitled person. I mean,
No,
just because we're white
exactly.
doesn't mean that we
These-
won't also fall foul of
Precisely.
these sort of,
I
let's
think these
face it,
people are corrupt and rotten to the
assholes.
core. I don't
Yes,
think it's because
correct.
they're
But
Yeah,
they are.
yeah.
But it's easier. It's easier to victimize people of color. It's easier to
course.
victimize minorities.
Yes, yeah.
And
And because you can paint the narrative, like we're talking about, whether it be terrorists or what, the overzealous mother, that's also part of the Southeast Asian mother. It's all like,
but like Clarky
yeah,
said, I think
all of that stuff's been done very
I
deliberately.
think we're in the break. You might have been in the toilet, but I was saying that Lovely had said that if this had been a white girl at the university or a white boy at the university, they would have spent more time searching. There would have been more helicopters. There would have been more effort. Sorry.
Yes.
And Clarky quite rightly said, unless she was a prostitute. And so there are class layers within colours as well.
Totally. And then if we had have gone down, there've been lots of cases where this kind of stuff has happened in the US, where if the victim was a female but the perp was a white male, we still then stand back and go,
don't even start.
was she doing something wrong? Look, it's just this whole
layer upon
thing
layer.
that, you see repeated time and time and time again, and it's like, oh God, I don't know how to punish these people except take their power away from them. That's the only thing I can think of.
Tony's got a suggestion for you.
Yes, Tony.
There was a social scientist, I can't remember her name, but goes to the late 70s, early 90s, who had this thing where she would get a whole bunch of people of mixed races in the room, and then she would ask everybody with blue eyes to put their hands up, and then they would go through a series of experiences where blue eyes were treated like black people and brown eyes were treated like white
I think
people.
I've seen some of this.
Yeah, and putting these people through something like that because blue-eyed people were crying,
turning it on them
before hours.
I've seen some footage of that. I think
I can't remember the lady's name.
Okay, but I take your point, which is a sentence which takes them out of their power, but also puts them in a position that makes them as powerless as Lovely and her family were in that situation.
Brilliant. Yeah. That's what you want them to feel, is that sense of like absolute helplessness where you are considered less than, and then you have no power to be more than. You have to be. There's no way out of that. That's the way you are viewed, and that's the way I want these people to be viewed, which is just the way they
treated everyone else.
People.
With the level of disregard that they showed to Lovely and her family around just doing their job and a bit of justice.
Clarky, woo.
I want to start by saying I'm quite upset by this. I think that naively, and I know it's naive, but I think our system is actually built around protecting people who are vulnerable. And I would like to pride ourselves, and I think we all should pride ourselves on the fact that when people are vulnerable, the system should support that. And I think when we get it right, we do an exceptional job of that. This is not an Australian story, it's an American
system.
one, but I don't doubt that this stuff happens in Australia.
Possibly.
Whether it's to the same degree or not, I don't know, but I'm shocked by this one. I think that the fact that he can get found guilty and whilst he's awaiting sentencing, change his legal team and then end up, having the charges dropped whilst they have to go and recount and regroup and come up with the case again. And here we are 8 years later. We can assess this in a few hours in a podcast and go, something is definitely not right here. And I haven't seen all the detail. I don't profess to have seen all the detail, but I know enough to know something is very, very wrong. We spoke about Darren Hinch the other week and his shame. Like there is so much shame for anyone involved in that system.
100%.
I don't think anyone involved there should be able to stand up and go, we've done well here. In fact, if they're not all going, my God, how does this happen? I get that some of them might have been in a culture that was terrible, but 8 years on, they should be able to go, what happened there, we are just not okay with. And again, without getting to the point of Gage being guilty, innocent, whatever, let's just fucking all have a serious, honest conversation about what's happened and get to the bottom of it, because Lovely has not been treated well. But the fact that she's as gracious as she is, I find remarkable. Got people judging you because English isn't your first language. You've got people telling you to go home because we can't be bothered. You've got people asking you for the reward money that you're actually not entitled to. Like, there's so much wrong at that point. And then I thought that was the shocking bit. The fact that we've gone all the way up the chain, and it's probably more disgusting.
So the
at
rage
top
meter hit
than it is at
11
the
out of
bottom.
10? Because it should.
Oh, I don't. Yeah, my rage meter doesn't have a scale for that bit. So,
Yeah, my
in
rage
terms
turned
of
into something else. I feel really uncomfortable with even.
horrified,
Disgusting.
sick. Like, it just.
Worse than disgusting.
Oh,
I don't know. I know this. I know I'll think about it a lot afterwards. It's that thing where
I felt helpless
It's not-
about it.
I'm very naive, I think, and I think sometimes I see things in movies, or I sort of. This is where I start to put the pieces together, and I think, how can politicians be so corrupt, and how can that be the case? And it's people like this who end up in positions of power
Yeah.
and become politicians that I then go, it's taken me an awful long time to start to realise how that works.
yeah.
And I know that sounds very naive, but it's only really been in the last couple of years
I'm
that
the
I've
same though.
truly understood that
The
route.
rot starts
I didn't get that
early.
before.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And now that I start to understand how you get there, who's looking after you, who you're representing, and all the rest, that's quite a lot of what I've taken out of this. It just, that to me, certainly the back half of the story feels like it's directly out of a movie plot where it should be some big actors and it just be the most controversial thing that someone's come up with and it's, Oscar worthy. It just feels that big, like so.
Yeah.
I just sound very,
It's like
I don't know,
the
immature,
Colour
but it just feels like
Purple
big
or
and bad.
Shawshank Redemption, where the whole thing is just wrong. Like, it's
yes.
it's
Yeah,
that
and you
bad.
can't
But
believe you're watching it. That couldn't really happen. That wouldn't really happen. It's just
yeah,
like in a
as
movie,
if
but it's like,
I'm go-
God, that's where I
Yeah.
find it very uncomfortable.
I'm like you though.
Very
I
uncomfortable.
agree with the naivety of it all, and I think the shame that we all should feel, and that whole phrase I said earlier, the standard you walk by is the standard you set. I don't know how many people walk by this standard and all went, yeah, no worries. Like, just
Shame on them.
be better. Just
Yeah.
be fucking better.
Absolute
you
shame
know.
on them.
Oh, yeah,
Schmidty,
yeah.
in listening to so much and reading so much, did you get a sense that there were the people that Pravin went to university with, the people that were not just his family, but really the people that he had dealings with, were they still fighting for him? Were they still there trying
Yeah.
to do the right
Yeah.
thing? Thank goodness. I'm
There
so
was a
glad that
big-
that was the case, because I assumed that they
Yeah,
would have
no.
been, but it's so nice to hear that you were reading things that they said and
Yeah.
had seen. and-
Pravin impacted a lot of people's lives, and Lovely said something along the lines of he
Yeah.
never met a stranger because everyone became a friend of his.
Everyone
You know,
became a
he
friend,
was
yeah.
he was that
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
guy, and he was interested in everyone
Yeah.
and he'd talk to anyone. And so he didn't, as a result of that sort of behavior, he had a lot of people who knew who he was. Everyone liked him. He had no enemies. And so when he died, there was a real outpouring of grief from the family and other people around him that this could happen to this
Good.
guy. So there are good people
Yeah.
in this story. That's what I was trying to say earlier, where for every shitbag,
Yeah.
corrupt politician and policeman or whatever, there were 30, 40 really good, not police, not powerful people trying to do the right thing in this story and supporting the family.
In the
The
background,
200 who came
That's
from
right.
all around the place. The school student body. And I haven't even touched
Yeah.
on the university, right? Because universities
Yeah,
don't
right.
like students getting murdered because it's bad for business.
It's not great.
So part of their why they
Correct.
don't tell
Very
anyone
true.
that he's missing is because of the impact on the university itself.
Yeah.
So they
yeah.
played the story down, but I can understand that to a degree. I cannot understand the police
Yeah.
playing it down. What's in it for them?
No.
I just think that from the university's perspective, what's good for business is actually being transparent and open and honest, not trying to cover shit up. Like, again, be better. You you could go, the minute we find out that someone's missing, let's just start the process, just in case.
Now I think
Exactly
you're
that,
being very
yeah.
naive.
Maybe, but again,
I'm not saying that to be a bitch or being facetious. That is exactly what a good person would do. But these businesses and schools and universities, it is totally the opposite. I guarantee you, it is minimize.
That university was in a town of
Just to hear.
25,000. Almost all of their students would have come from somewhere else. So they
and all of those students would have wanted to know that the university had their back if something went wrong.
I
And this
don't
is the
disagree
problem,
with
right?
what the students
They take
wanted.
the wrong approach.
I agree with you.
No,
but the
the
university's
business.
position would have been hide this because we don't want our prospective students to discover we're not a safe
Keep
place.
it as quiet as we need to.
Especially
And
for
that's
someone
why I'm calling it out,
outside
right?
of
Because
Camden.
8
Of
years
course, and you're
down,
right.
8 years
I'm not
down the
arguing with
track,
you.
they should
No,
learn
no,
and
no,
be
no.
better.
Yeah.
Play
There
the
should be
long
some-
game,
No.
not the short game.
Of course.
And put
I don't think
placards
they
in
would,
the
but
front yard of the
course.
joint.
But the other point I wanted to make is that even if he was an alcoholic or a druggie, he still doesn't deserve what happened
No,
to him. And I
100%,
feel like for some reason, Michael Carr and others
Try to
were
justify
trying
it.
to say, well, it's okay that he's dead because he was an
What
alcoholic
did you
or
expect?
a druggie. In terms of sentence, I'm not going to sentence individually, but I want to bring back an old friend from last week's episode. So you recall we did Slender Man, and
Oh, yes.
Slender Man initially started off as being somebody who was, a real threat to children, and by the end of it, almost became a protector of children.
Mhm.
And so I think that Trial by Wine should enlist Slender Man to assist with some of their punishments. And so I think that to the whole legal system, Slender Man should become a figure that lurks around in the hallways and the elevators and, late at night and threatens to do evil, I guess, because we're not going to be specific about
Just
it.
being
It's more
threatening.
scary
It's got to
if
be
you don't
threatening.
know.
That's right. Yeah.
But do evil if you don't do your job properly. And so, when you're about to practice how you're going to accuse somebody of being a druggie, even though the toxicology report says that they're not that, or when you're going to meet with Lovely and tell her that if you pursue this, all of this is going to come out. Whilst you're coming up with that idea, you're going to see Slender Man walk past behind you in the reflection of your computer screen, or if the lights are
Just to
on
remind you to do the right thing.
inside and it's dark outside, Slender Man will walk
Mhm.
past. And
Yeah.
so there's going to be constant fear every time you think that your shitness is the right way to go, and hopefully that will make them change their minds.
Well, thank you. I know that was a disturbing case. I'm sorry, but also I think it was an important case to bring to our attention. Thank you, Akash from California, our listener there, for bringing that to our attention.
Good on you, Akash.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
And it was
Thank you.
sad and tragic.
You've got my heart rate going. Thank
and
you.
you wound us up. So good job.
Absolutely.
And guys, I miss you already. Ciao.
Miss you more.
Well done, Schmidty.
Bye.
Ciao.
Love your work.
Thanks for listening to Trial by Wine. You can contact us at trialbywine@gmail.com. Please rate, review, and subscribe to Trial by Wine on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to support us, you can become a patron at www.patreon.com, Trial by Wine, or visit our website www.trialbywine.com to donate to us. Your support will help us cover many more cases and apply wacky sentences. We really appreciate you listening and hope you tell everyone about us. Our cover art is by John Christo and music is by Beauchamp from pixabay.com.